we come to a head here on Console Wars, the dramatic read-through. Welcome, everybody. Good to be back here once again. We are coming up near the end of this fabulous little thing that we decided to do. I have a usual cast of wonderful characters with us today. FTB.
Hello.
Alexander Smith.
Hello.
Jonny.
Howdy.
And Mario. No, Jumpman.
Hello there.
We have, we've gone quite a ways through Blake J. Harris's Console Wars, Sega Nintendo, and the Battle that Defined a Generation. How do y'all feel now that we are getting into real plot again, instead of just, ministrations on, I hate Nintendo, I hate Sega?
Are we sure we're getting into real plot, or are we going to approach plot and then have a series of nested flashbacks?
It's always possible.
Well, Ethan, all I can say is you don't know what we can find when we read from this book.
Well, baseball.
Yes, that should have been obvious from the cover.
Yes,
But
I want to read his baseball history that has all sorts of strange video game metaphors. Like, I think he should...
And it was game over for Babe Ruth.
Let the sound take you away, Ethan.
He talks about the gambling scandal with Pete Rose, and then he just immediately starts talking about Nichibatsu machines for like 200 pages.
He hit the ball so hard it went flying, just like Mario in Super Mario Bros. 3.
All right, let's jump into this very weirdly placed that we actually really start getting in. Like, this all kind of happens in a big cascade in like 4 chapters, but he weirdly started the section 2 chapters earlier. And as always, we have our dramatis personae, a little preview of the characters we are going to meet in the chapter, and we will divvy out the voices as necessary. Mr. Smith, will you start us off?
Sure thing. First, we have Diana Dare, marketing manager.
Oh, nope, you are
at
on
Sega.
the wrong chapter.
I am?
Yes,
I'm on the
it's
wrong
chapter 54.
Oh, wow. How did that happen? No, my book got weird. We have Bill Andresen, Joseph Lieberman's chief of staff. Simply appalled.
Give that one to Jumpman.
Yes, sir.
Next, we have Chris Andresen, son of Bill Andresen, and unwilling instrument of government regulation. Jonny, you take that one.
Then we have Bill Andresen's wife, plot momentum.
I'll have that. And then we have Big Joe himself, Joseph Lieberman, freshman senator of the United States Senate from Connecticut, about to make great hay. When we get to the chapter, we're going to talk a little bit more, just in case for those who don't know, a bit about how the U.S. Congress works. But I know that this role must be FTB.
I'm trying to remember if I could even go with his sort of droopy voice like this.
And as almost
I'm gonna go ruin healthcare.
And as almost always, we have Tom Kalinske, president and CEO of Sega of America. No more jokes. Time to get serious.
And let us do such as we move into chapter 54, Night Trapped.
Mortal Kombat?
Bill Andresen asked his son.
What's that?
Oh, wait. Hang on. Aren't I Andresen?
Yeah, you
There are
guys
two
have it in reverse.
Father and son.
Okay, well,
Right.
we'll just go with that, so you can be Chris.
Okay. It's the best game ever.
Chris Andresen replied very matter-of-factly. They were in the kitchen having a family dinner as opposed to a not family dinner, and Andresen looked to his wife to see if she might have any idea what in the world their son was talking about. It's a video game, she said. He talks about it all the time.
Because it's the best game ever.
Chris Andresen repeated.
And it shows why Sega crushes Nintendo.
Mortal
I'm
Mon-
sure
No, go ahead.
kid. I'm sure the little kid was like, yeah, Sega's winning the console war now. Yeah. It's like,
Totally, they were totally keeping up on their market studies, as the numbers were coming in.
Exactly.
And,
has a subscription to the Harvard Business Review.
Yes,
you know.
exactly.
I mean, he is, son of a senatorial, assistant, so maybe. Mortal Monday had come and gone, and as Kalinske had hoped, Sega annihilated Nintendo. Mortal Kombat on the Genesis outsold the SNES version, and in the progress, Sega had finally, impossibly, amazingly surpassed Nintendo. They now had 55% of the market, but more important than the numbers were the conversations like these, where 9-year-olds were convinced Sega was now king. I mean, this one, the market stuff doesn't come in until after Christmas, and there were other things they had for Christmas that helped.
I like that it's like the recess playground fights are about market share of Sega.
Exactly. Because the NPD did report in January that by their estimates, Sega had seized 55% of the market at the end of 1993, but that wouldn't have been known yet. And of course, that was all NPD estimates too, which are particularly unreliable pre-1995. Like the modern day NPD actually disavows all data before 1995.
Yes, mainly because they didn't have a couple retailers that were actually giving them information. Yeah. And now we live in the completely nebulous zone where we have absolutely no idea what anyone is selling, and the companies prefer it that way.
Yes.
Andresen nodded. He liked the idea of buying his son a video game. Decades ago. Decades. He used to really enjoy playing in the arcades. You remember that game called Speedway. And he fondly remembered when his wife had first introduced him to Atari's home version of Pong.
I guess that almost qualifies as decades. It was 18 years before. They got one in 1975 when it first came out.
Man, why is he singling out Sewer Shark? Sewer Shark's not that violent.
Johnny?
Oh, okay,
I mean,
I'll look into it.
Yeah.
In the coming days, Andresen looked into his Mortal Kombat and was appalled by what he found. It's not as if he expected anything like Pong, but this game was just incredibly inappropriate. The violence, the blood, the glorification of cruelty. And Mortal Kombat was just the first clue about what was really going on with video games. There was one called Street Fighter and another called Streets of Rage. They're raging in the streets. And those weren't nearly as bad as the newest ones coming out on CD, like Night Trap and Sewer Shark. You can't encourage kids to play in the sewers. Come on.
Plot twist:
Right.
Streets of Rage did get a Sega CD release, but it was bundled with like 5 other Genesis games.
After this brief personal journey to the mountaintop, into the world that his son apparently adored, Andresen decided...
Conrad shit here. Like, he's going into the heart of darkness.
Andresen decided to share these findings with his boss, Senator Joseph Lieberman, a Democrat from Connecticut. Democrat in giant quotation marks. But
Yes.
that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
As it turned out, Lieberman was just as appalled as Andresen, his chief of staff, who went on to explain that in addition to this horrific Mortal Kombat, there were plenty of other similar games out there.
Look, Senator,
Andresen reasoned.
I realize that some people might call our reaction here prudish, but that's not really the point. These games are becoming more and more like movies, and I can't help but wonder if parents have any idea what they're buying for their kids.
Yeah, like, how concerned were you about movies when they got more violent? This conversation and their mutual concern led Lieberman and Andresen to delve further into the matter. Although they weren't the only ones in Washington sniffing around this issue, they quickly became the most serious about getting the government involved. But before taking any action, they needed to better understand exactly what was going on. And to do so, they looked to the top of the industry and found the 2 companies most responsible for what was going on. Sega and Nintendo.
So did they get briefed by Andresen's son, who apparently knows everything about who's who on top
Well,
of the
you
industry?
see, the Nintendo company was founded in 1889 to make playing cards.
Now I'm imagining
And then the aide was like, "Didn't they go into Taxis and Love Hotel?" And the son was like, "Shut up."
Well, you see, folks, I happen to be very good friends with Mr. Kalinske, and I kind of have an inside scoop on what's going on, you know?
now I'm just thinking of just like console wars, but like all the president's men.
Yamauchi in darkness.
Perrin Kaplan, who had
Call
worked
me
on Capitol
Sore
Hill
Throat.
prior to joining Nintendo, still had contacts in
All of the
DC
fatalities.
and was informed about what was going on. This was much more than Arthur Pober talking about whispers. These were distinct conversations going on in the shadows. What do they do in the shadows? And this made Kaplan intent on educating Senator Lieberman about what Nintendo did, so she invited him to come to Richmond. Kaplan expertly worked
Redmond.
Oh, what?
Redmond.
Visit Redmond. What did I say?
Richmond.
Wow, okay. Redmond.
If they sent him to the wrong city, that could have fixed a lot of problems.
Kaplan expertly worked to assuage any doubts he had about making his trip west, and any lingering concerns were likely erased by Senator Slade Gorton of Washington, who had worked with Nintendo on the Mariners deal and was also a close friend of Senator Lieberman, aren't they all? Once the plans were made, Lieberman and members of his staff visited NOA headquarters and got a crash course on Nintendo and the kinds of games the company produced. Kaplan talked about how Nintendo had resurrected the industry through miraculous quality control, and how any NOA vigorously vetted and sometimes censored its games to ensure a wholesome quality, and how Mortal Kombat was a great example of the difference between Nintendo and its primary competitor. This is not a slight on Sega, I mean, it kind of is, but merely the facts. And Senator Lieberman appreciated the information enough to roll up his sleeve, pick up a controller, and spend some time trying out the Super Nintendo. After returning to D.C., Senator Lieberman gave the issue further consideration. On November 17, 1993, he distributed the following letter to members of Congress.
Your colleague. A woman is stalked in her home, mutilated, and murdered. A man is instructed to finish his opponent in a martial arts contest and chooses to rip his opponent's still beating heart out of her body. These examples may sound like shocking cases stemming from the current epidemic of violence plaguing the United States.
There's totally people
In
ripping people's
fact,
backs out.
They are witnessed by children every day.
Oh,
Worse, children participate, since these examples are drawn from some of the most popular and most disturbing of a new generation of video games. Gone are the days when video games were just Pac-Man and other quaint characters.
He said the
Advances in
line.
technology permit the latest video games to use real actors and actresses to depict murder, mutilation, and disfigurement in an extremely graphic manner. And the technology is rapidly becoming even more realistic. Today's graphic games may seem mild compared to the CD-ROM and virtual reality systems which will change the market very soon.
Yes, Dactyl Nightmare, the most violent game imaginable.
These games will come right into our living room if a pilot cable channel for video games slated to begin next January proves successful. At a time when real violence is threatening to tear the fabric of our country, these games glorify the most depraved acts of cruelty. While parents across the country are trying to teach their children to abhor violence, these games encourage children to enjoy violence. The Washington Post recently quoted a 14-year-old boy on the appeal of one particularly disturbing video game. It's violent. It's real. You can freeze the guy. Cut him up. Shoot him with a hook that has a rope so you can pull him. I like the moves. And stuff.
Oh, no, and stuff!
The video game industry has not addressed the danger presented by the latest creation. In fact, some have made violence a selling point. One was introduced to great fanfare on Mortal Monday. Currently, parents have a very difficult time knowing which games are slightly violent and which are truly repugnant. No uniform system exists for warning a concerned parent about the violent content of a video game which she is buying for her child. I plan to introduce legislation and hold a hearing on this topic. The legislation will create the National Independent Council for Entertainment in Video Devices, NICEVID, which will oversee a two-stage response to the threat of joystick violence.
Oh my god, that is
Wait,
an
wait.
acronym right there.
The first stage is a one-year window in which the council will encourage and work with the video game industry to address the problem through voluntary means. If the industry fails to take credible steps within that one-year period, the council will be charged with mandating what type of information concerning the contents of a video game should be available when a person buys a video game. At the time, the council will have the authority to consider a variety of responses, including establishing a mandatory rating system, warning labels explaining the content of the product, and point-of-sale warnings. Do not ask me if I'm going to do this for Supreme Court judges. Today, more than a third of all American households have video game systems. Almost two-thirds of children between the ages of 6 and 14 play video games. Parents deserve to know what they are buying for their children. If you would like to co-sponsor this legislation, please contact me or have your staff contact Sloan Walker of the Subcommittee on Regulation and Government Regulation at 224-3993. Sincerely, Joseph I. Lieberman, Democratic Senator, Connecticut, ?
Wonderful.
Let's take a second. That was.
I gotta get a drink.
That was beautiful.
Yes, and FTB is sick today too. So
Oh my
I apologize. I forgot that it was that long, but that was a wonderful impression of the late Joseph Lieberman.
Wait, hang on.
Yeah, for those of you who were young to not remember Joseph Lieberman was a spanner in the works of a lot of democratic legislation, most notably an attempt to sort of move towards a more socialized form of medicine. He was the dissenting vote on that from the Democratic Party, and and that basically caused a chain of events that kind of led into the current political divisive hellscape we have now. So he's had other things on his plate other than the video game legislation. We just like to make fun of him for this one because it's more obvious, stupid, and recorded.
Yeah.
I have to get a drink.
Wait, hang on. Nice fit. Shame about the song.
I don't know the song.
If you've ever seen Not the 9 O'Clock News, you'll get it.
Well, I'll just have to be the uncultured one today. Anyways, as
Oh, man, I
Kalinske.
gotta clear my throat before that.
Yeah, do your thing. You got resting time now. As Kalinske read these words, a brittle numbness set in. All the darkest thoughts he'd had over the past 2 years, those moments of doubt about himself, Sega, or the video game business at large, were being held up to a mirror the size of the Washington Monument. Why the monument? That's just a really tall mirror, I guess. His toy industry days were behind him. The man who had once empowered children to imaginally become masters of the universe would now be seen as the peddler of smut, the drug pusher who gets children hooked. The first one's free kitties. That's why we put Sonic on the box.
Because nobody said that about the cartoon shows supporting all of the action figures.
I just want to point out that it's legal now, but the illegal dispensary in New York City does not have Sonic characters on its outside. It has Mario characters on the outside. So
now I'm imagining the evil Sonic from The Simpsons. Take it!
Wait a minute, no! Those were just the doubts creeping in again. A variant on the universal doubts that all humans are prone to when to have when the sky blocks out the stars. What?
When
What
ancient
do they
cavemen
mean?
wondered, if their video games were too violent.
The sky blocks out the stars? What?
What does that even mean? It has
yeah.
not been updated or changed in my edition.
It's like the Asimov short story. Once Mortal Kombat is completed in the mind of every child, the stars will start to slowly go out one by one.
Oh boy. If only he was smart enough to make that illusion. Am I worthy of success? Am I the beneficiary of luck, misconceptions, and the work of others? Have I been a good
this is where he
husband,
sings.
father, and friend? The letter on Kalinski's desk preyed upon his
Kalinske
worst fears.
And realize that this is not his beautiful house. This is not his beautiful wife.
This has been the most referenced
that one on my
song
nose. Thank you.
in this entire read-through. But Senator Lieberman's words didn't magically turn doubts into facts. Well, here were the facts, Alex.
Okay.
No, actually, no. Jonny,
Yeah.
read this one out.
Thank you.
80% of Sega's players were older than 12 years old. Sega was the first and only company to institute a rating system which had successfully been in place since July. Over 90% of the titles released for Sega systems were rated GA for general audiences, not Gimme Alexandria. Sega worked with Scholastic, the teacher-trusted publisher, to create a widely distributed brochure aimed at educating parents about video games. On Sega's
Sadly, that
own
was
initiative,
the unfortunate Scholastic book fair. The more stuff you sell, the more violent a video game you get, kids.
On Sega's own initiative, it established a charitable foundation targeted at giving our youth a better society. In only 2 years, the foundation had already raised $4.3 million. If Sega was guilty, then so was Nintendo.
Yeah, spread the blame.
NEC just sitting back watching it like, wow, this guy's fighting seems really intense.
They're out. They don't have a shot. After considering this last fact, Kalinske decided to write a letter to Nintendo of America's man behind the curtain. And on November 22nd, 1993, he sent the following.
Dear Mr. Arakawa, though we have never had the occasion to meet, I believe recent developments merit this attempt to open a dialogue with you. As you know, our companies embrace different approaches to handling fighting games and adult-appropriate interactive entertainment. I think the time has come for a comprehensive, industry-wide approach to the issue of informing consumers about our products so they can make intelligent purchase decisions. In short, too late, I think it is necessary for our nascent industry to grapple with, and for you and I to proactively lead, that industry to a uniform, responsible solution to this issue, one of which we all can be proud. As the leading companies in the video game category of the large interactive media and entertainment industry, you and I can forge a bond of personal commitment to doing what is right for all involved, ensuring free choice and enabling people to control what comes into their own homes.
Yeah, so don't invite Olafsson.
That's right. He is not invited. He can't come in. I
What
am
do you
urging
mean?
you. I am urging you in the strongest possible way and with the greatest respect to join us at Sega and the scores of independent software companies who make software for both Nintendo's and Sega's hardware platforms in adopting the Sega rating system administered by the Independent Video Game Rating Council, VRC, which is composed of highly respected PhDs from a variety of disciplines, or to adopt some other similar rating systems and to communicate it on your new products. You know, as do I, that your company creates and or permits marketing of software titles for your game systems that portray a level of violence as great as anything in the industry. In fact, the PhDs of education, childhood development, psychology, and sociology on our own VRC tell us any game where the objective is to demolish enemies through martial arts or weapons should be designated for an audience over 13 years of age, no matter if animated blood is included or not.
Is Fireball a weapon? Are feet a weapon?
Nintendo's game development guidelines are Goomba's racist. Nintendo's game development guidelines are an inadequate way, one, to ensure consumers' freedom of choice. 2, to enable consumers to gain enough information that would allow them to exert software titles brought into their homes. And 3, to guarantee they are always appropriate for the age of the user in that home.
You should have
I know
stayed
you-
with Popeye, Arakawa.
I know you must appreciate that your guidelines were probably appropriate for this business when it was less sophisticated, and when over 3/4 of the user base was under 17 years old in the late 1970s and early 1980s.
Yes, the 1970s. Totally.
Yeah,
Totally appropriate.
indeed. Now, when our technology is so much more sophisticated and increasingly attractive to adult audiences,
It's
it
not
seems to me
just
an industry...
it's just not Nintendo with blood. It is much more sophisticated.
I was thinking something similar, but didn't know how to articulate it in this context. Very good. It seems to me an industry-wide rating system is the type of responsible self-regulation you and your company should join us in adopting.
As a successful proprietor of several love hotels, you should know, doesn't it?
I am sure that we could find sponsors in our government's legislative branch who would assist us in getting an antitrust exemption to collaborate on this matter if that is a concern inhibiting positive response to this untreaty.
You know, the Game Over did just come out when he was writing this, so he could know about the love hotels.
Mr. Arakawa, tear down this wall. Mr. Arakawa, I ask you to please, with an open mind, consider the suggestion and to consider the benefit we all gain by doing the right thing for the consumers, adults and children, who have been so generous in rewarding both our companies with such great success during the last decade. Attached is additional information on the Sega rating system. Sincerely, Thomas J. Kalinske.
Oh, he used his full name. You know he's serious.
Bunch of cartoon Sonics pointing out violent content. Hey, kids!
That's no good.
Attached is additional information on the Sega rating system. The Sonic porn is just an added bonus and a personal gift from me.
You know, but now my question of this is, you know, obviously this is drawn from a real letter that was, you know, that Kalinske drafted and showed, you know, his copy to Harris over. But the question is, you know, we made a big deal about him having Howard Lincoln's number. Why didn't he call first? You know, that would be my question. But we'll get into now. We get into Howard Lincoln's thoughts. One thought that raced through Howard Lincoln's mind as he read through Tom Kalinske's letter: boo-hoo. If it weren't for Sega, none of this would be happening. You don't get to stand on the shoulders of Nintendo while trying to climb up the mountain and then ask Nintendo for help when it's time to climb back down. Boo-hoo! That said it all. But it didn't make for a particularly tactful response. Nor did shredding Kalinske's letter into confetti and sending it back to Sega. I don't think that's a little over the top here.
Yeah, think of how much the postage would be for all those separate bits.
He's sending us a message. Big the cat sleeps with the fishes.
Dale commented in the chat that this could have been an email. Following Senator Lieberman's call to attention, strong support in Washington had led to a series of study subcommittee hearings slated to begin on December 9th. Lincoln would be attending the hearings on behalf of Nintendo, and Kalinske would likely be there to represent Sega. Lincoln and Arakawa believed that the hearings would be an appropriate time to reply to the issues voiced in Kalinske's letter, so they opted to focus on preparing for that, and not waste time becoming Sega's new pen pal. Although they didn't write back to Kalinske, there was a Nintendo mailing that indirectly amounted to something of a reply, one that accomplished the take that sense of the confetti party, but remained elegant and tactful while also serving a purpose. When the drama had first started to unfold in Washington, D.C., Perrin Kaplan had made a VHS tape containing the most graphic scenes from Sega's Night Trap, a graphic grisly game that was unlike anything Nintendo would ever offer to its customers. And to demonstrate the difference between the two companies, Kaplan arranged for several hundred copies of these tapes to be sent to representatives in Washington prior to the hearings. things. If the video game industry was about to be sent in front of a firing squad, then she wanted to at least make sure the riflemen knew where they should be aiming. Okay.
Yes, because Nintendo didn't make an FMV game where you shot people in the street.
Yes. Aren't we all glad that, as Howard Lincoln promised in the hearing, that Night Trap never has and never will?
Yep. Indeed. Now, this is a thing from the Sega people, that they have said that Nintendo made this VHS and sent it out to people. And Perrin Kaplan does appear later in this, and, this is the ambiguity of Harris. We don't know if he actually talked to Perrin Kaplan, if she actually said this. I doubt it. And I still continue to doubt this story that that Nintendo made this VHS as if, the rest of the people who were doing the grunt work wouldn't have done it for them. Of what appears actually in the hearing. So I think this is BS. And might even be libel. Yes.
I'm just imagining like a little animated opening. It's me, Mario, and I'm going to show you about all the violence at Sega. It's no good.
They get Lou Albano for it.
Yes, exactly. As a wrestler, I know all about violence, but it's not appropriate for children. Hey, kids, get out of here,
So, yeah, I think that's just more Harris taking the side of Sega kind of deal. Okay, we are on to chapter 55. We start off with Ashley Kalinske, elder daughter of Tom, blissfully unaware of the machinations of the U.S. government. Now, I can't remember who took this role originally because this was way back in the day, but Jonny, you shall take that.
Then we also have Nicole Kalinske, middle daughter of Tom, about to have the worst Thanksgiving ever.
Jumpman. Then we have the hero, Tom Kalinske, president and CEO of Sega of America, never misses an opportunity to sell. That's, of course, Alex.
Yep, of course. And finally, we have Brenda Lynch, PR agent for Sega of America, shielder from Metaphor. But this is Blake Harris, so it doesn't work.
Yes. And that is FTB. Okay, on to chapter 55. It's just windy, not
there's no
a metaphor.
the humanity
Ah, dang.
paragraph about
I should have put something in there.
Humanity.
You seem to know what's going to happen in this chapter.
Hedgehog Amity? Oh, the Hedgehog Amity!
So on live thought it was hilarious.
At 48 feet tall and 26 feet wide, Sonic the Hedgehog was a chunky boy, and he soared through the sky. Swiftly and serenely, Sega's beloved mascot made his way through the chaos of Manhattan. The newest, larger-than-life balloon in Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, through a deal struck by Tom Abramson.
They were warned about the winds, and people were struggling already. That is not correct.
Yeah.
Where is he?
Ashley Kalinske asked from the window of a building downtown.
Yeah.
Nicole Kalinske added, eager to see her dad's friend, Sonic.
He's coming.
Tom Kalinske told his daughters.
And he can't wait to see you. But in the meantime, don't forget to stuff your faces with food.
Behind the window, in the room full of retailers, merchandisers, and other friends of Sega, was a wonderful buffet that added an exclamation mark to the occasion. It had been a hectic past few weeks, what with preparing for the Senate hearings and the media storm that would inevitably follow, but Thanksgiving offered a nice chance to step back and enjoy Sega's success with his family. Kalinske had flown out to New York and his wife and kids a day earlier, enjoying a quick romp around the Big Apple, and ended the day by taking his girls over to Central Park West, where they got to see the balloons being blown up outside the Museum of Natural History. Is that where they do it?
That's not right. No, it's north of there because that's the end of the parade route, you goddamn idiot.
Just before we continue, I would just like to point out, since this is New York City, there's a chance that Al Nelson witnessed this.
He's the guy that popped the balloon.
Yes.
He's the second man on the grassy parking vehicle. Just
Revenge.
Yes.
slowly, the camera cuts away.
Getting
to him
back
slowly
at you,
lowering
Tom.
A blowgun. Yes, slowly lowering a blowgun and driving away.
I knew I should have left when I had the chance. Is that him?
Nicole asked, ignoring the table full of cookies. Well, a little kid wouldn't do that. Come on.
Either that or the
No.
bat's going to go by and turn
Authentic.
into Olaf Olafsson.
No, it's just Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Ashley said, having no taste whatsoever. Come on, Ashley. Clifford is the best. Disappointed. Kalinske put his arms around the girls and was about to remind them not to worry, but at that moment he was informed that there was an urgent phone call from Brenda Lynch that required his attention. He excused himself and walked
There,
over
a
to the
second balloon has hit the
area.
lamppost.
To the reception area to take the call.
Is everything okay?
He asked right off the bat, but of course it was not. Apparently, Sonic's incredible aerodynamics had backfired. No, balloons don't have great aerodynamics. That's part of their
That
design.
is. Yeah.
And a vicious gust of wind had rammed him right into a lamppost at West 58th
68th.
Street and Broadway. Because of the balloon's size and velocity, a light fixture had fallen and hit an off-duty Suffolk County police captain named Joseph D. Kistinger.
Kissinger, yeah.
Kistinger. The medics on hand believed he had broken his shoulder and were about to rush him to the hospital.
I thought a second person also got injured too.
That's right. Yeah, this is not 100%. And also, multiple balloons were damaged in that because they went ahead even the warnings about the
We're going to
winds.
watch the footage after this, by the way.
Roll that beautiful bean footage. Is this a joke?
Kalinske asked incredulously, glancing at his daughter stationed by the window.
No, I'm sorry.
Lynch said.
It's just windy, that's all. Bad luck for us.
Maybe it really was just bad luck. Something to laugh about for the few years down the line, but in the moment it felt like
Oh, we
something
laughed about
more
it
than
instantly.
that. Fate?
Remember that one
Karma.
time when our balloon hit that guy? That was hilarious.
He didn't know that somebody was injured at the time. He just saw Sonic explode.
Remember
I'm
when
talking about you guys. I'm talking about Kalinske here. Like maybe it's something to laugh about a few years down the line. Like when
Remember-
that person got hurt by her balloon. Like if no one had been hurt, yeah, sure. But come on now.
Metaphorical proof of the company in denial? In decline? Yeah. This
I mean,
is
you
the
know,
kind
if
of
they hadn't
metaphor
had
we're
somebody
getting.
jump out and say fatality afterwards, they would have had a stronger case before the Senate.
To the outside world, decline would have been the last word to describe Sega. After the release of Mortal Kombat, Sega had pulled past Nintendo and was hotter than ever. Kalinske, of course, was thrilled by this, but ever since SOJ had thwarted the potential deals with Sony and SGI, he'd started to notice cracks in the foundation. Little things usually, but the things that he hadn't paid much attention to before. For example, Ryu had been pushing...
Like console inventories? Like console inventories?
What inventories, Alex? There's no such thing. Sega's selling out of everything, including the Sega CD. That's why they think the 32X is a good idea. For example, Ryu had been pushing harder than ever for permission to manufacture hardware in North America. It would be cheaper this way. I highly doubt it because the labor,
Yeah.
it's not that
Yeah.
cheap.
No.
And you know,
I think I know what he's implying, but like,
parts
if
would
we
be
had not,
cheaper.
if we'd
yes.
not turned our holy eyes away from Tom Kalinske, we would have had a differing life for the Saturn in America, is what I think he's leading toward.
And save time on shipping, but SOJ would not allow it. They manufactured all of hardware. That's just how it was. At this point, however, the cultural differences...
Yeah, I just want to say, so Kalinske, where was Mattel manufacturing everything? President. One of the first companies to offshore manufacturing in the toy industry.
That'll interfere with the hagiography, though. This has to end like the movie Excalibur, with Tom Kalinske going away on a boat surrounded by 3 maidens to one day come back and bring Sega back to him.
Someone is familiar with the film.
Get some Carmen Burana going here.
But it wasn't.
The end of Siegfried's funeral is played at the end of.
At this point, however, the cultural differences with SOJ were to be expected, but it was an unexpected incident that had him most concerned. In early 1993, Sega had made the decision to split up Sonic 3 into 2 separate games. This was a calculated risk, one that they likely would have taken again, but between that decision and now, one of the game's best assets had been eliminated. Yeah, fuck all the game people that were actually working on it. Michael Jackson. While the company was working on the soundtrack for Jackson 3, allegations surfaced that Jackson had molested a 13-year-old boy. True or not, the stigma was too crippling to ignore, so the decision was made to unwind the deal with Jackson and remove any association he had with the game. At the time, that too seemed to just be a case of bad luck. But between that, the Senate calling subcommittee hearings, and the Sonic balloon fiasco, bad luck seemed to be an unfortunate trend.
I was going to say, I wonder if the allegedly molested 13 bad luck. I mean, come on now, Blake J. Harris.
Also, I believe people looked into this. I don't think the timing works out in terms of the allegations and all that. I think it was something that was kind of in the air, but I don't think it like really came out like right in the middle of doing the song.
I am amused that he's basically stating that Clara seems to be implying that the Sonic Thanksgiving balloon is some kind of false idol against God that has reached this karma upon.
Yeah, and
look at the Sonic balloon.
And as we discussed with the
he doesn't know about Japanese baseball because he'd be like, he was the same as the Colonel Sanders statue that was thrown in the river.
And as we discussed in one of the previous chapters where this was brought up, the majority of the work was being done by one of the producers. I can't remember what his name was. So it was really just
Boxer.
Okay, right. And so really there wasn't that much association with Michael Jackson, but yeah, they would have touted it if he had kept on. That much is definitely true. I believe Roger Hector kind of clarified the whole situation once upon a time.
I think it was him, yeah.
What would you like me to do?
Lynch asked. The only good part about receiving this lousy news from Brenda Lynch was that, well, he was receiving it from Brenda Lynch, and when it came to spinning stories, that woman was a Black Widow.
I do not think that metaphor means what you think it means. Because, like, a Black Widow PR person spinning a story, doesn't that mean that
they all die?
The person is actually killing the company that they're doing the PR for? I mean, I know all of his metaphors are bad, but I really don't think that one works.
This chapter is especially bad for that, it seems. And
go ahead.
And it was titled "Not a Metaphor," but now he's using the worst metaphors possible.
That is terrible. When it came to spinning stories, that one was a Black Widow. Get down to the hospital.
Kalinske instructed.
And try to make this significantly less bad.
I'll do you one better.
Lynch replied.
How about making this into something good?
Before Kalinske could answer, she was already gone. Lynch ran through the snow-paced streets of New York City. It was not snowing. We'll see the footage. It was not snowing. Generally, it doesn't snow in November in
Lola Run
New
music
York.
playing for some reason.
Leaving behind her husband and 2 children so that she could get to the hospital and twist bad luck into something good. In the following days, the press broadcast all sorts of stories about Sega's balloon going rogue, but instead of focusing on an officer down, they were almost all about how Sonic was simply too damn fast to ever slow down. This was a moment when I read the book where I was just like, okay, yeah, sure. We'll live with that. All right, now let's watch the footage.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Tonight, a hedgehog dies.
This is J.D. Dapper reporting. From the start, gusty winds were a big concern for parade organizers, as it turned out, for good reason. Just before 10:30, a first-time balloon, the 64-foot tall Sonic the Hedgehog, was swept into a street lamp at 58th and Broadway and punctured. The balloon began deflating. It pulled the lamp off the window on the ground where the falling metal injured a man and a little girl.
He smashed into the lamppost, broke the lamppost, and the large part of the lamp came down and looked like it smacked this fellow in the back.
Fell right into the crowd.
Yep.
The man was taken to Roosevelt Hospital with a shoulder injury and has been listed in satisfactory condition. The little girl was treated at the scene. Earlier, as the balloon made its debut to the crowds of adoring video game fans, the balloon captain said the wind was causing problems.
It's a little more difficult than usual.
Difficult or not, the parade went on and the kids loved it, especially the 16 giant balloons. There were 3 other debuts, the longest ever 85-foot animated dinosaur Rex, Atlanta's 1996 Olympic mascot Izzy, and the cute St. Bernard from the movie Beethoven, who proved particularly popular.
Beethoven was cool. He was really huge.
Why do you like coming every year?
Well, it's really exciting and a lot of people.
Kids are really thrilled about the dead kids.
Beethoven one.
What about Bart?
He's old already.
Kids not caring about the
But
Simpsons.
for a group of New Jersey high school students, the thrill was being in the parade.
It's just so exciting. This is our first day season. It's great.
We're just watching this whole
really
thing just because.
You're prepared to be on national TV?
It's so exciting seeing someone get
I hope
crushed
I
by
don't
a
get hit by a
hedgehog.
giant hedgehog balloon.
We practiced this particular routine. We practiced about 3 weeks, so we spent a lot of time on it.
Including
And
the
in spite of
hedgehog
the
balloon
frigid
death.
weather, there
It
were
was hard
plenty
to
of
get
people
those
who
from
saw the
second.
bands and
I will say,
floats
doing
and the
marching
balloons.
in a parade
Police
is way
estimate
more
at least
fun than
2
doing it in the
million
stadium.
people were along the parade route this morning. Originally, this parade was designed to mark the start of the Christmas shopping season, but nowadays it seems that stores put up Christmas decorations starting at Halloween. Still, as is traditional, Santa brings up the
If
rear of
only
the
it
parade
was,
this year,
just in
marking at least
Halloween.
the unofficial start of the holiday season. On the west side, Jenny Dapper, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
So there's a little taste
look
of
out for that
1993. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. So yeah, lots of details wrong in this, which you wouldn't think it would be that difficult to get some information, but going through the snow and only one person injured and like.
Now, folks, you can see the reality that he's actually been talking about for this whole book. That's the world you've been trying to imagine, except it's not imagined.
All right, here we go. We're into one of the climax chapters where everything comes to a head. Alex, will you start us off the dramatis personae for chapter 56?
Yes, we do start off with Herbert Kohl, yes, of that Kohl's department store, freshman senator of the United States Senate from Wisconsin, just the other guy on the committee.
Yes, so basically how these committee things work is that basically if your party controls Congress, you can at any time really just call for a committee and investigation on something. And a freshman senator is somebody who is in their first term as senator, and a lot of senators were previously in the House, the Congress. So they've been in politics for a while, but they're just now in what's kind of the center of U.S. political power. So a lot of people who are in their freshman year, they want to make a mark. And this kind of seems to be what... Or not year, because it's 6-year terms for senators.
Yeah.
And this seems to be kind of what Kohl and Lieberman were doing.
Yeah. Only one other senator from the subcommittee bothered to attend the hearing.
Yes. From North Dakota, I believe.
I think it was South Dakota, but it was a Dakota. It was definitely a Dakota.
Yeah,
Yes,
media perception at the time was that it was very much Lieberman's thing. And then the way that the footage was covered after the fact didn't really do anything to deter that in any way. Also, he wouldn't shut up about it, so that also was a factor.
Who is Bill White again? Just so then I don't give that role improperly.
That was me.
Okay, so Jumpman, so we'll have Jonny take the role of Herbert Kohl. Then we have Joseph Lieberman, freshman senator of the United States Senate from Connecticut. When could have been vice president if it weren't for video games. Another thing in which Joseph Lieberman is famous for is that he was Al Gore's running mate in the 2000 presidential election.
Yeah, and if you don't know about the 2000 presidential election, kids, buckle up.
Yeah, well, we've got some politics things to talk about here. Not politics, but political things.
That was my first election. That was my first presidential election. I was old enough to vote.
Were you in the state of Florida at the time?
I was not.
I know somebody whose first election was at that time. He was in that county, actually. Broward, the Hanging Chad County.
Yeah.
Next up.
Delightful. Next, we have Howard Lincoln, Senior Vice President of Nintendo of America. If Nintendo's going down, he's taking you down with them.
Played by myself. Next, Bill White, Vice President of Marketing at Sega of America. Turncoat bastard. Played by Jumpman.
Also sporting his best Gordon Gekko look for these
I'll be
hearings.
right back. My apologies.
And finally, we have, of course, Tom Kalinske, President and CEO of Sega of America. Shocked, awed, and dismayed. But enough about Sega of Japan.
I felt good coming up with that one. But we are in for combat. Mortal Kombat. Chapter 56, Combat Pay. Bill White hadn't necessarily planned to pull out the gun, but when he noticed the way everyone in the room was looking at him, he felt he had no choice. The chips had been stacked against him from the beginning, ever since Senator Herbert Kohl, D. Wisconsin, called the session to order.
This meeting
He had begun stoically.
Is a joint meeting between Senator Lieberman's Government Affairs Subcommittee of Government Regulation and Information and my Judiciary Subcommittee on Juvenile Justice.
Okay, I thought that this was weird before. It said Government Regulation and Regulation, so I think that was just a Harris typo. I don't know if it... Yeah, we didn't even check if it was fixed because I just thought it was stupid. That first sentence had sounded harmless, like a run-of-the-mill politico-speak, but after that, it became open season.
Before I turn the meeting over to Senator Lieberman, I want to make one point. Today is the first day of Hanukkah, and we have already begun the Christmas season. It is a time when we think about peace on earth, goodwill towards all people, and also about giving gifts to our friends and our loved ones. But it is also a time when we need to take a close, hard look at just what it is that we're actually buying for our kids. That is why we are holding this hearing on violent video games at this time. That is why we intend to introduce legislation on violent video games as soon as Congress returns. Senator Lieberman?
Thank you very much, Senator Kohl.
Lieberman had said, and then got right down to it.
Every day, the news brings more and more images of violence, torture, and sexual aggression. Violence and violent images permeate more and more aspects of our lives, and I think it's time to draw the line. I know that one place parents want us to draw the line is with violence and video games.
And then he said it, the soundbite that would forever define these hearings.
Like the Grinch who stole Christmas, these violent video games threaten to rob this particular holiday season of a spirit of goodwill.
Now, this is something to get into here. We talked about this when Alex, Carl, and Dale did the commentary on the live hearings. But once upon a time, the Democratic Party was far more about regulation. And maybe in still some ways today, but how Reagan was very anti-regulation, the Democrats had a reaction against that they wanted to go heavily on pro-regulation. Yeah. So this is, this is more in line with what the Democratic Party was at the time, even if you may view this as conservative today. just to give it a little bit of political context.
Yeah, and Lieberman is what we used to call a dino, which is to say a Democrat in name only. He is, the only thing, he's more dino than, an actual brontosaur. Yeah, it needs that bad Jurassic Park meme theme meme thing where they played the thing. Yes, exactly.
On the recorder, yeah.
But at the time, like people like Tipper Gore and Joe Lieberman were going on sort of like concerned parent things as a way of essentially getting reelected, and that's essentially what this was. There was a huge push for things like explicit lyrics labels on music, and now this game thing was sort of very much of the culture of that time.
And we recommended it then when we talked about when we did the commentary. But go listen to the D. Snyder, testimony at the lyrics hearings, because it's great.
Yeah.
Yes. Featuring Lieberman's erstwhile running mate.
You can deal with the seeing the after effects of violence of somebody from a bad attempt. The documentary Dream Deceivers about the Judas Priest thing is also very good. It kind of comes out of the same moral satanic panic stuff we had in the 80s. So it's sort of like a hangover from that time. So
because there also had been a period when violent crime was on the rise.
Yeah.
It had actually just begun a decline that would continue for the next 20 or 30 years. But in the 80s, there had been kind of a steady rise, which was also fueling some of this panic.
Right. So, and the rest I'll save, because then I'll sound like completely screaming leftist. So I'm going to avoid talking into the racial connotations and all the other.
Though, just to say,
and Lieberman's an especially bad hypocrite for some of the things he's saying right here.
And just to say, with the dino comment, he did eventually go and register as an independent.
Yes, right. Yes.
So he did leave the Democratic Party. After the good senators had set the tone for the hearings, a parade of assorted experts delivered testimony before the representatives of Sega and Nintendo, who were brought in to defend their livelihood. Parker Page, president of Children's Television Research and Education Center, spoke first. He suggested that the federal government fund an independent research into the psychological effects of video games, as not enough was known at the time. He recommended that until more was known, the industry ought to put a cap on the amount of violence allowed. After that, the floor went to Eugene Provenzo, a sociology professor at the University of Miami, who had recently published a book on the subject, Video Kids Making Sense of Nintendo. He indicated that his extensive research had revealed that beneath the fun of a seemingly harmless diversion lurked a number of insidious themes. Oh, I forgot to...
we need a Provenzo.
I'll do it. During the past decade, the video game industry has developed games whose social content has been overwhelmingly violent, sexist, and racist. And, again, we talked about all the context in the commentaries, but one thing that Kent points out is that when Provenzo is talking about violent video games, he's including sports games.
Yep.
And his methodologies are garbage. He should not be a sociologist. Following Provenzo came Robert Chase, vice president of the National Education Association. He began by warning against the dangers of censorship, but then seemed to upend his own thesis by explaining the incalculable effects of this new form of entertainment. I can't believe I missed all these. All right. Jonny, you take it.
No worries.
Electronic games, because they are active rather than passive, can do more than desensitize impressionable children to violence. They actually encourage violence as resolution of first resort by rewarding participants for killing one's opponents in the most grisly ways imaginable.
You want to give me a source on that? The last of the experts was Marilyn Draws, vice president of the National Coalition on Television Violence, who simultaneously complained about too much video game violence and not enough video games for girls. After these experts had delivered their diverse pleas for caution, a group of industry panelists were invited to take a seat in front of their senators. The panel of 5, including Dawn Wiener, the Video Software Dealers Association, Craig Johnson, Amusement Operators Association, our man right there, Craig Johnson. Not related, but just in the commentaries, he was the guy who did not want to. Yeah.
Let's pour it out for poor Craig Johnson, who had to explain over and over again that Represented did not sell games that go into the home.
Yes.
They were able to wrap their heads around this fact. He had to repeatedly be like, well, as I said, we don't sell into the
we're watching the commentaries is worth it just for him. Eileen Rosenthal, Software Publishers Association, and the main attractions, Howard Lincoln, Nintendo, and Bill White, Sega, who were seated beside each other, only adding to the tension. Howard Lincoln spoke first, and from the moment he opened his mouth, it was clear that there was no environment on Earth that could ever make him appear unpoised. The man had nerves of steel through and through, which appeared even more impressive in contrast to White's natural reticence.
Don't fuck with me, I used to be a Nintendo game counselor.
In the past year, some very violent and offensive games have reached the market, Lincoln described. And of course, I'm speaking about Mortal Kombat and Night Trap. He spoke briskly but calmly about the conscious business decision that Nintendo made back in 1985 not to allow violence or pornography, eschewing profits in favor of ensuring quality control. This was the Nintendo way, a relentless commitment to values, and as proof that it hadn't wavered since then, he cited the company's decision to censor Mortal Kombat. And not only had the company left money on the table by making this decision, they'd also received thousands of angry calls and letters from parents around the country who criticized Nintendo for censorship. If Senator Lieberman hadn't already seemed to favor Nintendo, then Lincoln's comment about the blowback clinched it, which made it seem even tougher when a man from Sega spoke next. When White did everything possible to defend Sega's actions.
The average Sega user is almost 19 years old.
And appealed to those in the room, both as a father
of two boys, aged 5 and 8.
And a former Nintendo employee.
Having worked there for 5 miserable years.
But no matter what he said, it appeared to the die had already been cast. He was the villain, and his attempts to appear anything less than evil made his villainy all the more obvious. The longer this went on, the worse things got for White. Some of this was due to Lincoln's well-crafted expressions of exasperation. I can't sit here and allow you to be told that somehow the video game business has been transformed today from children to adults. It hasn't been, and Mr. White, who is a former Nintendo employee, knows the demographics as well as I do. Some of it was due to Senator Lieberman's continual praise of Nintendo, which he felt had been a
damn sight better than the competition.
And some of it was due to the ways that clips from some of Sega's latest commercials seemed to offend about just about everyone in the room, except Tom Zito, who was there. little fun fact. And as the hearings transformed into a well-dressed, well-worded pile-on session, White saw no other option to defend his and Sega's honor, and so he took it out. The gun. He held it up proudly, like a championship belt.
He's got a gun.
Chapo!
What did Nintendo do?
Nintendo's big gray Super Scope bazooka. White had brought it with him to Washington without advising anyone from Sega, and kept it under the desk in case things got out of hand so he could start murdering everyone in the room.
Oh my.
As the eyes of the room squinted at him with disdain, he saw no other option, and so he pulled it out.
A rapid-fire machine gun.
White said decisively.
And they have no rating on that product.
It should have been Bill White's moment of triumph, delivering the kind of personal screw you that creates a lifelong pocket of confidence, but he had flubbed his words. Upon lifting the bazooka, White had said accusingly,
I may also point out that Sega produces this product.
When obviously it meant to fire a kill shot at Nintendo by naming it as the producer. Was this actually an illuminating Freudian slip, indicating that the only executive who had worked at both Sega and Nintendo saw deep down that the companies were interchangeable? Blake, stop! Stop reading into this!
I'd like to introduce Blake to a little guy named Bruce Lowry. It's not the only executive who ever worked at both companies.
Right.
Or in Japan, Tokuzo Komai.
Indeed. Perhaps, but it didn't matter. Bill White had fired his silver bullet, and as noble as the effort had been, nobody in the room appeared to be particularly moved by it, causing the shot to come right back at him. Okay, so Blake makes a big goddamn deal about the word slip here, but the thing is, Joseph Lieberman corrects him.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was expecting that.
Yeah, that happens immediately afterwards, and then in the documentary, when they play this scene, they literally splice him saying Sega out and put Nintendo in. It was so bizarre. I had no idea why they did that.
I hope it was badly dubbed, by another person.
I think it would seem seamless if you hadn't heard this before, but I'd heard it before, and I'm like, why did they do that? What? Yeah, so this is not any kind of deal, really. This is so weird. All right. Roll us in, Kalinske.
No!
Kalinske exclaimed when he heard White jumble his words. He was back in Redwood Shores, watching it live on C-SPAN. From the television in his office, and despite the flub, he was very pleased with how White had handled himself, perpetually poised, meticulously defensive, and just the right amount of angry. I don't think there's really any anger in what he's doing. He's just kind of, he's fighting for his life out there. And so the following day, when White returned and walked through the office doors at Sega of America, he was greeted by a standing ovation.
He's trying to make it like the McCarthy hearings, but didn't quite go like that.
Peter Main's former protege had delivered an admirable performance for Sega, and as a result, Senator Lieberman and the other members of the committee had decided to give the industry a chance to regulate themselves before the government chose to intervene. There would be additional hearings in March 1994 to check in and see if the progress had been made. But for now, the threat had been deterred.
Are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Nintendo Fun Club?
And something that Harris just doesn't answer. He was saying, you would expect Kalinske to be showing up at the hearings. Why was Bill White sent? I still don't know.
Yeah.
And that baffles me. What was the reasoning to send Bill White? Regardless of the fact of whether he did a good job or not, why send him? That's something I need to know, because it's so bizarre.
I hung his ass out to fry.
Welcome, Dale. Good to have you. We're about to get to your beautiful part.
I've been lurking.
Indeed. For Kalinske, this turn of events meant even more than just Sega's safety, and when it relieved a lump on his conscience that he had been growing for some time. Whether he was the true villain for having allowed such games to be released, or the actual hero for creating the first rating system, didn't matter anymore, though it matters a lot to Blake J. Harris. It was time to move forward, and he would be doing so unscathed. He had Bill White to thank for that. To show his gratitude, Kalinske gave White the largest Christmas bonus that he had ever received. When he asked his boss what it was for, Kalinske smiled and explained it hadn't been his idea.
A week or two after your triumphant performance, I went down to Capitol Hill to speak with many of the same men who had grilled you. One of them, of course, was Senator Lieberman. I asked him what he thought about how you had handled yourself. And do you know what he said?
B+.
Kalinske laughed.
He said, for what he put up with... Yeah, go ahead. No, do it.
For what he put up with, that kid deserves combat pay.
And that's the end of the Lieberman line, so that's why we had to have you do it.
I gotcha.
He motioned with his chin to the bonus check.
Well, as an upstanding American, I've been taught that it's wise to listen to your government representatives. So there you go. Moving on. No further commentary. No further commentary.
I just want to say that every time Lieberman was speaking, I was expecting him to end his sentences with "okay."
Yeah, that's about right. I'm glad I was able to convey that personality of his, because that's actually, I kind of feel like Mr. Garrison was based kind of slightly on Lieberman's voice.
That's a thought right there.
Don't play Night Trap, because Night Trap's bad, okay?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a short break.
Yes, Shinobu Toyota's back, so that means another flashback. I wonder if, like, Hayao Nakayama's office in this chapter is going to have, like a mountain of broken Sega Picos, because that was where we last saw him. Like, just be continually smashing them, just breaking into children's homes and breaking them like a Sagato Sanshiro commercial. He's just throwing them through the window and... Disappointed!
And it's like at the end, he does like that thing where, people stand on top of a mountain of all the people they've defeated.
Yes, exactly. It's the end of the movie The One, except it's Nakayama just throwing Picos down. All that video game violence is going to pale in comparison to what you are about to experience. Super Scope, what's wrong with you?
Just be glad they didn't know about the Famicom's gun.
Yeah, Bill's not there, otherwise it would be like, Mr. White, please stand against the wall by the target, and he shoots him with a Super Scope that's got real bullets. It's like a Spectre meeting in an old James Bond movie. He's got the mangled remains of the Pico. He's like, you see, I would be the one who was reasonable about this, but Mr. Pico here in my right fist, he is not happy.
And when Mr. Pico gets upset, people die! You expect me to talk?
And if everybody in the chat gets the Senate hearing and Red Dwarf and other references, we would like to remind you that it may be time to get checked for routine heart disease and other things.
You expect me to testify? No, Mr. White. I expect you to fight.
All right, we are resuming with chapter 57. We are crawling through the fallout of the Senate hearings. Firstly, we have Joe Miller, engineer for Sega of America. Doesn't need to worry about inventory. He's just an engineer. And who played him before? Is that FTB?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, FTB.
And then, as always, by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
At this point?
Yeah, for the moment.
Yeah. I think the problem is I think the new room that I'm in is a more live room. And so what I actually had to do was back way the heck off of my microphone. So I think this is going to fix it. But let me know if I start coming in too faint for some reason. Then we have Tom Kalinske, President and CEO of Sega of America, on edge in more ways than one.
Next is, that's Alex, of course. Next is Peter Main, VP of Sales and Marketing for Nintendo of America, unwilling to concede to his better half, played by Quarter Past.
Then we do have Bill White, Vice President of Marketing at Sega of America, Bear Poker,
played by Jumpman. Then we have Arthur Pober, psychologist and director of the Children's Advertising Review Unit and head of Sega of America's Video Game Ratings Council. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said Sega of America's because it's technically independent, but
Yeah.
can't we all just get along? Who played Pober before? I think I had that in the last one.
Yeah, we did have Pober once before, but I don't remember who played.
Jonny. So you will take that.
Then we have the Bulldog himself, Howard Lincoln, Senior Vice President of Nintendo of America, ready to resolve the emotional arc in this story.
Played by myself. Next, Minoru Arakawa, President of Nintendo of America, aloof and mysterious, just the way he likes it. Also played by me.
And then there's Tony Harman, Director of Development and Acquisitions for Nintendo of America, is surprised to have something go his way.
Normally played by J-Rod, but we'll give that one to Jonny this time around. Finally, Michael Goldstein, President and CEO of Toys R Us, newly appointed and ready to wield true power. And by the way...
Unlimited power.
That is kind of what I was going for. But I had to go and look this up because he got that thing wrong with the Viacom people before. And it turns out if the fact that he places this in a particular moment in time means he is correct. And I think he did actually go and look for this one to make sure that he wasn't just saying something out of his ass this time. Like literally this guy was the senior vice president and then he was elected to the president's position on February 1st. And he says that this takes place in February. So that's why it works.
You win this round, Harris.
But now to ruin David Bowie for you all. Chapter 57, Life on Mars. Tom Kalinske, Paul Ryu, Shinobu Toyota, and Joe Miller were all in Vegas for the 1994 Winter CES. And they could all be found slowly walking down one of the exquisite hallways in the Alexis Park Hotel as they approached Nakayama's suite.
Oh, sorry. Do you think he watched the hearings?
Miller asked.
Watched them?
Kalinske asked.
Or will admit to watching them?
I miss Toyota for maybe his last appearance. But yes,
I know.
Oh, no.
I know that he saw.
Jonny.
I know that he saw at least a part.
Toyota put in, anticlimactically ending the group's speculation about Sega of America's volatile ruler.
Sega of Japan's.
Sega of Japan's volatile ruler. When they arrived at his suite, they were ushered in to sit down with Nakayama-san and his chief lieutenants at SOJ to discuss the future. Who? Who are these people? Is one of them a Mr. Prince of Honda sitting down there? Iri Mashiri?
This would be the right time frame. Yeah. He should be, perhaps.
In the hours that followed, a lot of strategies for the year ahead were tossed around, but amongst SOJ's diversity of strategies, one thing was clear. They were ready to kill the Genesis.
It's time for the Genesis to join the Pico, Nakayama said.
That's good.
Look,
Kalinske said.
I think that staying on the cutting edge is as important as everyone else in the room, but not at the expense of something that's still working. I mean, we're barely even in the middle of the console's life cycle. I have all this inventory I still need to move in the warehouses.
Yeah, the idea that Kalinske would know what the life cycle of these things are when there hasn't been enough data in which to make that assumption is quite something. The statement was generally accurate, but it was also false, which is what accounted for part of the schism in the room. Kalinske considered the summer of 1991 to be the de facto American launch of the Genesis. That was when SOA had dropped the price, introduced Sonic, and started doing the kind of marketing that would redefine Sega. If that was considered the starting part of the life cycle, then this was really only year 3. Sega of Japan, on the other hand, had released the Mega Drive in the August of 1988, never enjoying a second win that SOA had, and consequently viewed this as something like year 6. Ultimately, though, this all boiled down to the fact that despite SOA's earth-shattering success with the Genesis, SOJ had continued to strike out with their Mega Drive. As a result, Nakayama proposed moving forward with a pair of systems to take Sega to the next generation. Dale, read these out for me.
Oh dear God. Project Saturn. A CD-based system with 32-bit technology that would effectively serve as Sega's next-generation console. No surprise here. This was the SOJ-only system that had been selected in favor of developing something with Sony in Silicon Graphics. And Project Mars, a cartridge-based system with 32-bit-like capabilities. This was basically a souped-up version of the Genesis.
I don't think he would have viewed the strategies at all in this way, especially given the fact that, they were throwing around a bunch of hardware, including the Pico, which was, repurposed.
Yeah, literally in that sense, at least according to the book.
I know we'll get to it later, but I'm pretty sure what would be Project Mars has the same 2 processors that's in the Project Saturn.
Yeah, does it have 2 SH1s or just one? I can't remember.
The 32X does, yes. As far as we know, the 32X was called Project Mars, but I don't think there's any indication that there was a Project Mars like before the 32X, like that was called that. Now, from the sources we have, it does seem like Sega in Japan was pushing kind of an intermediate system, but I don't think it was Project Mars. I think the 32X was Project Mars.
Yeah, so
I don't know.
Yeah, I forget how quickly are we going to get into this. Yeah, well, we'll talk about it at the end of this section here.
Yeah.
Kalinske understood the merits of the Saturn, which would eventually replace the Genesis as Sega's next generation console. That's not what he was saying before. He was like, "This is a piece of shit. Let's not do it." But what exactly was Mars supposed to be? SOJ had been pitching this 32-bit-like device for almost a year now. He had been shown something very similar to this back when he'd first seen the Pico. But as much as he enjoyed pushing the envelope with new products, he wasn't convinced that Sega would have the resources to fully support this. Nor were Ryu, Toyota, and Miller, as well as Nilsen, who was adamantly against this until the day he left. Sega was already asking developers to create games for the Genesis, the Game Gear, the Sega CD, and the upcoming Pico. That was already pushing the limit, and that's why the guys from SOA couldn't help but look at one another, spooked by the idea of adding more hardware to the mix. To clarify the proposed necessity, Nakayama explained that Mars would bridge the gap between the Genesis and the Saturn. Kalinske didn't understand what gap needed to be bridged, but the Genesis was still selling well, and the Saturn would be out in just over a year. But Nakayama explained this wasn't an issue up for debate. It was now starting to become clear that Kalinske was no longer the chief decision-maker. You never were! Like, in all these other instances, you did not... were you mad that they didn't pitch the Pico to you when it was already, you only saw it when it was like done, like,
right.
Sega of Japan was sick of being compared to the much more successful SOA and sick of watching the company's name get dragged through the mud in Washington, so they had decided it was time to take back the company at whatever cost. So Kalinske had better buck up and get used to life on Mars. Okay, so Joe Miller's perspective on this, as he gave in the interviews before he died with Ken, he was shown what he called kind of a souped-up Genesis that had extra capabilities, including the SVP chip that helps run the Virtual Racer cartridge, that super expensive one, like the Super FX chip for Star Fox. So they were going to integrate that stuff.
Virtua Racer, remember that one?
Oh.
So he was shown what is basically an intermediate console for that. It was not something that Sega of Japan was like, we're actively pitching, we want to do this. This was at the request of SOA. That SOA said they needed a product that was going to be well, they don't say necessarily this, but this appears to be the case. They needed a product that was going to be cheaper than the Saturn because they were afraid that the Saturn was going to be too expensive and nobody was going to buy it.
Yeah, and I'd love to have more demographic information on where Sega systems were selling into, but I get the sense that a lot of Sega's base was in lower income households. And so I do think part of that consideration was not necessarily that nobody would buy a more expensive system, but that they would be leaving a large portion of their specific consumer base behind. I don't have all the evidence I need to prove that, but I highly suspect it.
So, the basic idea of this is that Sega of Japan is pushing something onto SOA is one of the biggest falsehoods in this entire thing. Kalinske is abdicating responsibility for what happened with the 32X with this story.
And when I covered this in one of my podcast episodes, me and my co-host kind of made the point that the 32X was actually an example of Sega of America and Sega back in Japan working together and compromising with each other to create something that the American branch wanted, which runs completely counter to Harris and Kalinske's whole narrative about how Sega in Japan was this aloof organization that was just handing down pronouncements on high and was disregarding the American branch more and more.
Yeah, so this entire framing is absolutely wrong. I think we're going to get to the 32X thing, and then we'll talk about the what Joe Miller kind of did from there. But this is so deeply wrong in a way that completely badly frames the entire Saturn situation. SOA didn't believe in the Saturn. And and like Harris is going back and forth on this. Earlier they were like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. We need something different. So we need, they decided to go to SGI, even though the whole thing wasn't finished yet, and blah, 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 all this stuff. And now he's saying like, oh, I'm fully behind the Saturn. I think it's going to be great.
Well, you see what happened is when Kalinske came in and he saw Nakayama's pile of broken Sega Picos and didn't comment about the broken Sega Pitos, it just broke Nakayama's whole heart. So we had to force the...
I know it was you, Pico. You broke my heart.
Frustrating as the meeting in Nakayama's suite may have been, it wasn't the only get-together between those with opposing ideas for the future. In an effort to prevent Washington from putting the video game industry at the whims of the FCC, representatives from Sega, Nintendo, and prominent players in the software industry agreed to a secret off-site meeting in Vegas. The cloak and dagger aspects may have felt a bit excessive, but they were necessary to avoid allegations of market collusion. The first few hours consisted of little more than shouting and swearing. This is your fault. Now it's yours. Fuck you. No, fuck you. But beneath the infighting, the meeting provided an interesting opportunity for folks from Sega and Nintendo to finally sit down in the same room. Tom Kalinske, Shinobu Toyota, Bill White, Howard Lincoln, Peter Bain, and George Harrison, not that one, as all the alpha dogs had willingly come to the trough. Okay.
Trough? Wouldn't that be the alpha pigs?
Exactly. That is terrible. Even for Harris, that's terrible.
We're getting awesome. A lot of those this time.
Clearly, his editor was just done by this point. It's like
this book is 600 pages, right? Like something like that.
Yeah, it is 559 pages, including the index.
It's four-legged video game representatives bad, two-legged video game representatives good.
We've all come here for a common goal,
Kalinske explained.
And the answer seems rather simple. Why doesn't everyone simply adopt Sega's rating system?
How is that the simple solution?
Peter Main asked. Why adopt a system at all? Lincoln asked. Nintendo already closely reviews all of its content.
How many times do you plan to repeat that?
White wondered aloud, and And the shouting and swearing escalated once again. In the middle of the bickering, Arthur Pober arrived to discuss the possibility of using his expertise to create an industry-wide waiting system, something very similar to what he had created for Sega, but which would address the concerns of other companies at the table. Shortly after surveying what was going on in the meeting, however, Pober was ready to call it a day.
I have no interest in,
he declared as he walked towards the exit.
You are all men. Act like...
Bill White.
Gentlemen, please, this is the war room.
Yes. Oh, we're getting the good references tonight.
Men.
Bill White chased after him, urging him to reconsider, but Pober was adamant and said to call him at the hotel if they ever managed to get their houses in order. 2 houses, both alike in dignity.
Fuck you, Kalinske.
In fair Las Vegas, where we lay our seed.
Later in the day, while watching some terrible movie that must only ever get watched from hotel rooms, Arthur Pober received a call.
It was the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Everyone was now on their best behavior, and they would like for him to return. He accepted, put on his jacket, and looked at the clock. A jacket in Las Vegas? What are you doing? It had only taken a few hours, not awful. Perhaps there was hope for them yet. Pober's optimism was confirmed when he got back to the meeting site. The guys from Sega and Nintendo no doubt despised one another, but beneath the anger and irritation, they were all incredibly smart men. And they were smart enough to know that the he said, she said crap gets old real fast.
Look,
Kalinske said,
it's obvious our companies have different approaches to doing business. But while we're stuck together in this room, we need to suspend the past.
Tom's right, Lincoln said in support. We're all in this thing together, and we need to come out of this with a united front.
We're all in this together. Yeah, we know.
I don't like it any more than all you folks do, but I like it a whole lot more than the alternative. It became clear to Pober rather quickly that in a room full of leaders, Kalinske and Lincoln were the ones whose voices carried weight. And that was a good thing, because he'd worked with them before and knew them both to be capable of one of the rarest feats, not letting personal feelings or selfish desires clout their judgment. And so, by the end of the day, while nobody would be fool enough to say that Sega and Nintendo, or Kalinske and Lincoln, had become friends, they had certainly become friendlier than they'd been before, and demonstrated that they were willing to put down their swords in order to fight for the greater good.
And for the movie version, they're just going to do that Smash Brothers commercial when they are, jumping down the street and start beating the shit out of each other.
Me and you, and you and me, no matter how we toss the dice.
Copyright strike.
Indeed.
Thank you.
What do you think?
Kalinske asked Joe Miller, who would come into his office not long after CES to check out the latest prototype of the Mars project.
I think what you think,
Miller said.
Just with some more technical language.
Can it be salvaged?
Anything can be salvaged, but the question is, at what cost? Regardless, I've been speaking with a couple of the guys at SOJ, and if this is a road they are intent on going down, I have to seriously suggest that we consider doing this as an add-on.
Kalinske shrugged.
Pitch it as the next Sega CD?
Miller nodded.
Yeah, except I would note that the movie-like quality of those titles and the unique look of a compact disc make it an easier pitch.
Yeah, well...
Kalinske said.
If we've got to cut off either our hands or just our thumbs, the thumbs seem like the better choice.
Okay.
he gets out the machete.
I'll get the knife. I'll put the Lieberman right here, as every good engineer does.
Well, you said it, boss.
Just pulls out a chainsaw.
Kalinske relayed this feedback to Nakayama, who was now preoccupied with Project Saturn, which had run into a lot of developmental issues. SOJ needed.
They're already past the big one that happened in '93 when they had to have the second processor.
Yeah, I don't know what else they could have really
be
done.
preoccupied with them, you know.
SOJ needed all hands on deck to fix the Saturn and decided that Miller and his SOA crew should finish up the Mars themselves. As a compromise, they let him do it as an add-on. It was now Sega of America's problem to salvage a product they didn't even want to exist in the first place. Okay, so...
Bullshit!
Yeah, so let's talk on this here. So what Sega of America kind of saw the 32X as their compromise to Japan was that we're going to incorporate the SH1 processor. And so, you know, we can spend SH2 processor. So developers over here can spend some time getting familiar with coding for that processor. So when the American public is finally ready to go on to the Saturn, which, you know, we don't have to be in any hurry to introduce, then, you know, we're going to have a head start when we leap into the next generation. That was kind of their thought.
Exactly. And they felt that, and they really did. I mean, Harris sort of got this part right, but they did feel that they had a large fan base and install base for the Genesis that they could still squeeze life out of as well.
Yeah, that's the heart of this. You know, obviously in Japan, the Mega Drive is not really anything. In America, right. It was very, very popular. And so they were like, we can continue to, you know, get some life out of this, and we don't have to go and break the bank to try and extend the you know, what Sega is doing right now. They were very afraid of that $400 price point. It was basically video game systems were $299. Well, sorry, I didn't want to give away the quote, but I did.
I'm just thinking in Japan, darn you, PC Engine, for changing the course of history.
So, yeah, again, Sega of America was pushing for this. Sega of Japan relented. Some merely saw this as a hiccup in Sega's plans for world domination, after all. On the surface, Sega still had a bigger market share than Nintendo, but there were others internally. You could see that the tsunami was headed their way, and it was time to get out. Two of those men were Richard Burns and Doug Glenn, who had decided that it was time to ride off into the sunset into another opportunity. Both losses hurt Kalinske, as did remembering that Glenn had a reputation for leaving companies that had reached their tipping point in order to join the next big thing. What's that? What you working on? Mind if I take a look? Harman had recently grown accustomed to the constant interruption of questions like these from his colleagues, but it was starting to become a distraction. He knew that there was nothing but good intentions behind these inquiries, and he wouldn't have expected any less from Nintendo's congenial open-door atmosphere. Yeah, that's totally how Nintendo was run. But as Rare got closer and closer to finishing the game that he hoped would finally crush Sega, staying focused was more important than ever. What's he focusing on? They're over there. They're over in Britain. What are you doing? That's why he had decided to speak with Arakawa. I see, Arakawa said, weighing the situation. What shall be done? The most obvious solution would have been for Harman to work out of Rare's office in Leicestershire until the game was complete, but also would have defeated the purpose of building up NOA's product development capabilities. So, in the spirit of this objective, he offered an alternative solution.
With your permission,
Harman explained,
I would like to build a sealed-off area dedicated solely to development.
Okay, Arakawa replied, surprising Harman.
You don't need me to provide additional explanation?
Arakawa shook his head. The decision was made.
I just want to make sure you fully understand what I'm asking for,
Harman said.
Basically, it would be the equivalent of a top-secret, game-centric fort somewhere in the middle of our office.
Yes, Arakawa said. This is a good idea. Harman smiled serenely, fantasizing about what exactly this treehouse for adults should look like. I don't think
Not the Nintendo treehouse.
Well, I think this is
too early.
I think this is kind of what they're kind of leading into. I don't know a whole lot about the in-betweens here. I know what Harman did, but I don't really know what the Nintendo of America development apparatus kind of morphs into. So everything here is kind of ambiguous. When Glenn, Burns, and the other members of the team left, Kalinske did the same thing as always. Smile, nod, and, start to build an escape out of the zoo. And wish them for the best of luck. Never revealing the icebergs of discontent below that winning smile. Wait, the icebergs? Smile, nod? Is he trying to go for that reference?
The icebergs of our discontent.
Now is the icebergs of our discontent.
Yeah, sorry, now.
Yes.
Okay.
Made glorious summer by this, our son of Sega.
That's what he did during the good days, like Hedgehog Day event that Fornazier arranged to take place on Patuxi on Groundhog Day in 1994. And that's what he... Punxsutawney, that's right. I've watched the movie, I know. And that's what he did during the bad days, like when he saw specs for Sony's upcoming PSX console. I don't think the specs would mean a single goddamn thing to him.
Yeah. If we're picking on you, by the way, it's pronounced as shoe. Earlier you said askew.
Yeah. I'll that one is just accent. I'll say. It was rare that anyone could get far enough under Kalinske's skin to unleash the full spectrum of emotion, but Peter Main had made a career out of accomplishing rare feats. And in February 1994, there was something about the way that Main painted Kalinske as a charlatan that got so far under the president of Sega's skin that it sawed deep down into his bones.
It's weird how like this book was approaching plot, and now it's just randomly saying things. Like it was starting to coalesce into some kind of narrative, and now Blake Karras is off his pills again, and it's just kind of a bunch of paragraphs that are loosely connected.
They were at Piper Jaffray's annual industry conference in New York, where a couple of hundred bankers and retailers gathered each year to hear about the profits and potential of the video game industry. Speeches would be made by a variety of analysts, representatives of premier software companies like Acclaim and Electronic Arts, one of those on the downspin, and of course Peter Main and Tom Kalinske, just like at the CES shows. Just have to point that out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just as at the Consumer Electronics Show shows.
Yes. It was always a war of words between the two, but this conference each February, along with the Gerard Clower Mattinson one each October, offered an unusual chance for both men to engage in the war from the single room. So random. Why is this here? It was especially exciting for those in attendance to watch as they slung arrows, argued over numbers, and couldn't stop glaring at each other. Dale and Alex, are you angrily looking at each other from across the way? The perfect noise. Normally, Kalinske enjoyed playing up the rivalry and acting to Main as if they were mortal enemies. But this year, because of everything going on inside Sega, playing a game of heroes and villains just didn't seem as appealing. He was sick of the charade, year after year, and wanted Nintendo to just go away. Hadn't he done enough to vanquish them by now? Or at least relieve them of some of the arrogance before Sega went into decline?
It's not that I want to kill Nintendo. It's just that I wanted to not be alive anymore.
Despite the fact that since the release of Mortal Kombat, Sega had become the leader in 16-bit, Peter Main still talked about Kalinske as if he were some rube from the toy industry.
Now, after I'm done speaking,
Main said,
I'm sure my competitor will try and fatten you all up with some sort of numbers. But I'd like you to ask yourselves what these numbers really mean, and where he came up with some of these magical statistics. Oh, and while you're at it, find out if he has any idea what the difference is between sell-in and sell-through.
All right, Alex, you want to tackle this one?
Sell-in is what the manufacturer sells to retail, which then retail doesn't quite take on consignment, but in a way almost takes on consignment in terms of they don't necessarily pay up front for everything and wait. They get some latitude to wait till they sell through. They'll get like net 120 terms or something like that. Sell through.
I said ask Kalinske.
Sell through.
You're giving away the answer.
Sell through is actually what is bought at retail by consumers. And just gotta say, Peter Mayne's got a point here, because as we know now, and as Harris would have known if he had done his research, yeah, Sega had a lot of sell in and not nearly as much sell through. And then with their deals that they had with a lot of these retailers, they actually had to take a lot of that inventory back.
Yeah, that's
that
why
became a problem in 1994.
Yes. This is the tipping point, basically. And this is a firm belief from inside Nintendo. I mean, they believed this well before it was probably a problem, that they were always reporting sell-in versus sell-through. That they were continuously reporting of the stuff they sold to retailers rather than what got sold to customers. Because ultimately, in financial terms, you don't have to distinguish these things. It's just when it comes back, you have to put it on your balance sheet, and that's why in 1994, 1995, 1996, Sega starts losing lots and lots and lots of money.
Yeah, because retail basically, according to sources that we have now, the retailers basically forced Sega to carry a certain amount of inventory as replacement stock. And so Sega actually had fairly high inventories, not just that they had sold into retailers, but also within their own warehouses because of the replacement stock they were required to carry. And so when there was a downturn in the video game industry in 1993 and 1994, suddenly the systems weren't moving as fast at retail. And so all of that replacement inventory they had to take was backing up. And they had actually purchased this inventory from the parent company, and so it was actually a receivable on the parent company's end, and it was a debt on Sega of America's end. And Sega did not report its earnings in a consolidated fashion, which means the parent company's earnings were based on all of these receivables that they held, which were not canceled out by the debt held by Sega of America. And so it was all legal. At the time in Japan, you did not have to report earnings on a consolidated basis, so it was legal. But it turned out Sega was a giant shell game, and then it crashed hard, really hard. But Blake Harris doesn't talk about any of that. It's all about, no, Tom Kalinske was too brilliant, and Sega got rid of him, and then it was bad.
Yeah. And, obviously Alex has covered this on his show, and a lot of the information comes from various stuff that was translated by MD Shock, so you can go read it there. But Alex, at some point you do, all that info is spread across, 5 episodes, so at some point you will need to come back and, redo the whole thing, and, just talking about this specific problem.
That's true.
Yeah, that is something you'll need.
Cooking the books, Kalinske. So we call you Cooking Kalinske.
Well, but if everyone is just listening to They Create Worlds chronologically like they're supposed to.
That's right. How far along are you all
task. It has been a decade.
Oh, I don't mean chronologically from the beginning. I mean chronologically in terms of listening to every episode at the exact moment it slots into the chronology of history.
As one of those Star Wars Clone Wars guides, you gotta.
Or alternatively, you could listen to all of them at the same time.
It's the They Create Worlds expanded universe. For sure.
Yeah, it's like that one Brian Wilson album where you have to play four things at once.
After the snickers of laughter and a few never short anecdotes from Maine, Kalinske finally got his chance to speak. His words carried none of the for the greater good attitude that they'd held at the off-site meeting in Las Vegas.
Is it just me? Or does anyone else feel like calling up Dr. Kevorkian whenever Peter Mayne is done speaking?
Okay, somebody explain this reference to me.
Jack Kevorkian was a doctor
Assisted suicide.
that was doing assisted suicide.
Okay.
And was very controversial and had a lot of media coverage. He wrote a book and became a running gag because of the fact that he was helping people die, showing up in things like Married with Children episodes. You know, Al's having an argument, so he's reading a book by Jack Kevorkian, you know, that kind of thing. So he had become kind of a shorthand for comical suicide, essentially, because the 90s were weird like that.
And from here, Kalinske didn't relent.
Did you ever notice how Peter Main or any of those guys at Nintendo never have the guts to say my name or even the word Sega? It's always our competitor or another company, or it's always our competitor or another company in the industry. But I suppose we should take this as a compliment. After all, it's the same way my daughters refer to the boogeyman and other things that scare them.
You're not out of order. This whole video game industry is out of order.
It will be soon. Although
runs around screaming Attica, just put all the Pacino.
Although Main, like Kalinske, had a talent for removing personal feelings from judgment, he did not share Kalinske's skill at removing them from his face. He looked angry, as well he should be, because just as with that dog drinking from the toilet commercial, Kalinske wanted to turn everything into a popularity contest.
But we shouldn't be surprised.
Kalinske continued.
I'd be scared too if I were them. Peter wants to talk about numbers. So let me pass along some figures that I noticed he forgot to mention. In November, the Nintendo company announced a drop in earnings for the first time in 10 years. And what's Sega announcing?
I just realized, is this supposed to be like a roast session?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like the two of them, like taking a lectern and having at each other.
Kalinske's, he's supposedly in the book is approaching his DGAF phase, and he's just, it's like Peter, fuck you, you're cool, I'm out.
Does Peter get to get the mic again later and have back at him?
Yes,
it's going to devolve into a rap.
There's more Main. There's more Main.
Yes, Piper Jaffray cordially invites you to the roast of Peter Main.
Oh, that would be great. That would have been fantastic. As murmurs rippled through the audience, Kalinske's eyes glanced out the window, and he noticed that the snow was still coming down hard.
Kalinske is Max Payne.
There was a storm passing through the city, and they were expecting a few inches or more, but as the relentless whiteness kept falling, he couldn't help but reflecting that there was a certain beauty to it. Of course.
Oh, God, Blake Harris, I was kidding.
Of course, it wouldn't make finding a cab any easier, but to a guest from California, the snow came as a nice surprise.
Anyway,
Kalinske continued.
As I was saying, the numbers look pretty grim. Peter also forgot to mention that Nintendo's first half pre-tax profits dropped 24% from the same time last year.
I can't believe he memorized
Meanwhile, for those in the audience who like to compare and contrast, Sega's half-year pre-tax profits are up by 4.3%.
Kalinske went on to describe the many reasons he believed the two companies were going in opposite directions, and did so with that poke-the-bear flair throughout.
Now I realize that there are some of you listening,
he continued, looking to convert any lingering doubters in the crowd,
who might not believe a word that I've just said. Forget the marketing, you might say. Forget my management style, the work of my team, our rising inventories, and Sega's commitment to remaining on the cutting edge. That's not the reason that we have surpassed Nintendo in one market, just barely. You might think. It's all just because we were first to market way back when the Sega Mega Drive was crushing the NES. Obviously, I don't agree with that analysis. But even if that's how you feel, I've got news for you. It's going to happen like that once again.
Yeah, we'll check in. We'll check on the 94 profits. Alex, can you pull those up? It was true. Nintendo had made a grave mistake by letting Sega beat them in the 16-bit market, and they had conceded over the past few months that Sega was going to speed past them once again. Also, I should note that the NES was still, like, it was small numbers at this point, but that was pure profit that they were getting from the NES
And there was a little thing called the Game Boy.
Yes, that's yeah. Shouldn't forget that. Nintendo assured the press that everything was going extremely well with Project Reality and that the new hardware would apparently retail for under $250, but that, as part of the company's commitment to excellence, there would be a slight delay. Project Realities wouldn't hit stores until late 1995, which would be 1 year after the 3DO. What? 3DO launched at the end of 1993. No. What?
Yes, that is incorrect.
That is so
Jaguar,
weird.
Right?
And the pile.
And likely several months after the Sega Saturn, as well as Sony's hardware system, if they decided to take the leap and enter a market with the system they were now calling the PSX. Kalinske.
If you mean by if they decide to, that they're already deep in getting ready for its Japanese launch at the end of the year?
Reality has only taken so many Harris metaphors, and time is now collapsing. We are on the final disc of Final Fantasy VIII.
Kalinske still wasn't particularly excited about SOJ's mandate for Saturn and Mars, but at least they'd get to market quickly and provide Sega with additional opportunities to try and finish off Nintendo. And in keeping with the spirit of knocking them off the ledge, he didn't stop needling them throughout his speech. When Kalinske finished and the after-conference mingling had come to a close, it was snowing harder than before. There must have been at least 8 inches on the ground already, maybe even 10. Yeah, that's East Coast for you. Just then, Kalinske caught the tail end of a conversation between Maine and Michael Goldstein, the president of Toys R Us. And as they made their way toward the elevator, Maine was still trying to cast aspersions on Kalinske's sales figures, and Kalinske decided to intervene.
Do you really think I make this stuff up?
Kalinske asked, following the two of them into the elevator and reenacting that scene from Evangelion. It's an elevator scene. I had to do it.
Why, hello, Tom.
Goldstein said, happy to have both men together to settle this.
It wouldn't be the first time,
Maine replied, staring past Goldstein at his competitor.
And I hardly suspect it'll be the last.
How about this?
Kalinske suggested, as the elevator descended.
When we leave New York, why don't you come back to Redwood Shores with me? I'll show you the data we used to come up with those numbers.
What the hell is that going to accomplish?
Maine asked.
I doubt your numbers, not your ability to create a paper trail.
Mommy, Daddy, don't fight. Gentlemen, please.
Goldstein interrupted. But the sparring continued even as they reached the lobby, and had nearly gotten physical by the time they stepped out into the snow-filled streets.
Without Nintendo, there wouldn't even be a goddamn video game industry,
Peter Maine declared, now inches away from Atari, his competitor's face.
What the hell do I care?
Kalinske asked, moving even closer.
Do you expect me to be grateful or something? This is business, not charity.
It was business until you came in here with all your bullshit.
Then it must hurt even more to be losing to nothing more than bullshit.
Before any punches could be thrown, Goldstein wedged himself between Maine and Kalinske.
Come on, it's time to go back to your hotels for a nice, settling, civilized game of Mortal Kombat. You can choose if you want to play or not.
Let's go. I love how the streets are snow-filled.
Can we use a 6-button controller?
Yeah.
You get the Super Scope.
and Kalinske has to use the activator. Not appearing in this book. Both men wanted nothing more than for Goldstein to suddenly vanish, leaving them to transfer years of unrelated frustrations into each other's face. But the president of Toys R Us refused to give them this gift. He tried to flag down a cab so that he could send one of them away, but it proved very difficult because of the snow. And these are like CEOs going out here for this stuff. Would they not have somebody like with them to drive a car for them or something? You know, one of them.
Yeah.
He wants the dramatic final act, slug out in the atmospheric snowstorm in New York City.
Yeah, if they get this made, they're definitely coming to blows. as a film, this will definitely happen. Eventually, after several failed attempts to hail a taxi, Kalinske decided to walk uptown, and he slogged away through the thick snow. Maybe because he felt this made him the bigger man, or maybe because he was just too brittle to maintain all the anger. But more likely, it was because by whopping uptown on this one-way street, he would be able to intercept a cab that might have otherwise gone to Peter, Maine. Petty revenge at its finest.
And Al Nilsen is just staring out the window, watching the fight below. It's like, whoa, they're doing it outside my apartment? Wow.
What a beautiful image. All things come full circle. We should be directing the Console Wars adaptation, really. That should have been on us. All right, chapter 58. Alex, start us off.
Indeed. I just have to flip screens here. We start with Ellen Beth Van Buskirk, Marketing Services Manager at Sega of America. Sees nothing in the future. Please let me go back.
Normally played by Rage, but...
Rage is at work, I believe.
Jonny, you'll take that. Next is Al Nilsen. He's back. Vice President of Strategic Marketing at Viacom New Media. I had to go because... what was said in the book is wrong, so I had to go and look up on his LinkedIn page what this actually is. Never wants to give up the good times.
Then we have Don Varyu, Executive Director at Golan Harris. Hates going on trips.
And that is capitalized for reasons we will get into. Perrin Kaplan, Vice President of Communications for Nintendo of America. Suffering miscommunication. All right, so Don Varyu will be FTB, and Dale, you'll get Perrin Kaplan.
And finally, Howard Lincoln, Senior Vice President and Chairman of Nintendo of America, as angsty as a Nirvana fan.
That shall be me, because it fits. Chapter 58, Roses Are Red. Oh boy, this will be fun. Throughout most of February 1994, New York City was puddled in snow and slush. All right, FTB, is this accurate?
Yes, cold winter of that year. And New York City tends to be piled up in slush no matter what you do. It's why I wore things like trench coats in the 90s, because what would happen is I would be going from contract job to contract job, and I'd get splashed by a car and be totally ruined. So you end up with dusters and long coats because you have to protect yourself from the weird black and brown snow soot that develops over wintertime because they never seem to clear it all the way.
Living in New York.
Yeah, it's different than upstate New York where you get ice so bad you take a mall and you slam the mall down and the mall breaks, which happened to me this year. So...
It made getting around town so much more difficult than usual, but the blizzard-like weather wasn't enough to keep Al Nilsen and Ellen Beth Van Buskirk apart. Since Nilsen had moved to New York for Viacom, and Van Buskirk had moved there as well to work at Sega Channel, they tried to stay in touch and get together for coffee every so often. Not only did these connections confirm to both that this friendship was of the lifelong variety, but whenever they got together, it had the strange effect of rekindling that old Sega magic. Alone, each of them was a smart, confident, and clever individual, but together, they became something else. Voltron!
Oh.
Over the years, they would always be that way. Not just with the two of them, but with Kalinske, Ryu, Toyota, Fornazier, and any of the others who had unknowingly forged this unbreakable bond. Perhaps that was what made team success such a beautiful thing. The wins and losses were inherently impermanent, but the feeling among those on the roller coaster ride would somehow sustain forever. Aww.
Remember that time we stayed up at CES all night and created the core system?
Van Buskirk mused.
And remember how we...
Oh
And
God!
remember-
Now we're flashing back to earlier chapters.
Yeah.
And remember how annoyed those Nintendo guys looked the next morning when we came out before them with $99?
I'm still not convinced that night followed the normal rules of time.
Nilsen said, finally getting a look into Blake Harris's process.
Yeah, just like this book.
I've gone over it in my head several times since, and I've come to the conclusion that between 2 and 4 a.m., at least 8 hours actually passed. Wow, Blake, you really don't know how time works, do you?
Oh,
Van Buskirk added, happily tapping the table.
and remember how strangely talented Diane was when it came to breaking and entering?
How could I ever forget? How is she? Have you spoken to her?
She's great, enjoying life, enjoying work, and enjoying whatever comes in between. Actually, and please don't repeat this, she and Dawn are trying to get pregnant.
I knew it. I knew it. Of course not.
Nilsen said.
Oh, remember when we all had to pull that Aladdin, is it Ephraim?
I think it's Eprom
Ephraim, yeah.
because...
Ephraim is fine. Yeah.
Epip. Anyway.
Ephraim.
Ephraim is right, but Ephraim is fine.
I'm sorry to interrupt this trip down memory lane,
Nilsen said.
but I'm going to have to inject a stupid metaphor in order to meet the quota. I'm going to have to pull you over and check your license. Jesus Christ, kill me.
My license to go down memory lane?
Van Buskirk asked, reading the script.
Where's Jack Oblivion when we need him? Am I right?
I thought you said this was the climax of the book. This was a climax, and that was just navel gazing. I feel like I'm watching No Country for Old Men and those weird last 20 minutes where things just sort of happen. Like at the very end of this, Tommy Lee Jones is going to shake his head and he's going to be like, yup, that Blake Harris.
No, Ellen, it's because you're driving the wrong way down the interstate.
You're going to get us all killed!
Oh my god.
You see, Ellen, back when I worked in Sega, when I said to show you speed, I didn't mean like this. Yes.
Nilsen said.
I believe it's called a nostalgia permit.
Is it like a back credit card?
Oh, good God.
I was just about to say, well, I hope you remember it
Blake
so
Harris
I don't
went
have
on
to.
eventually become the romance dialogue consultant for the Star Wars prequels.
Oh, sure. And why is it that my license has been revoked?
Because you still work for Sega.
True, but not really. Sega Channel is different.
Different is one way to put it. Van Buskirk had expected the transition to be something like being traded in baseball, going from, say, the San Francisco Giants to the New York Mets. Definitely not the Definitely not the Yankees. She was forever a woman who despised the designated hitter. Wait, why does this have to do with the Yankees? What?
That's league-based.
It has to do
AL
with the
uses the
American League.
the AL uses
Generally.
the designated hitter.
Oh.
It's not something the Yankees instituted, for Christ's sake, Harris.
Yeah. I mean, now both leagues use the designated hitter, but in the 90s they did not.
But moving from Sega of America to Sega Channel turned out to be more like being traded from the San Francisco baseball Giants to the New York football Giants.
Don't wish that on anyone.
Of course, I'm just habitually against New York teams because I'm from Massachusetts, so that's just my way. It was a completely different sport and not nearly as fulfilling. Okay, making some statements here, Harris. She still believed in the vision of the company. It was a brilliant idea whose time would certainly come. But for the moment, the cable operators made it impossible in the present. By June 1994, Sega Channel would have a total of 21 companies signed up to carry the service, but the cable companies were so boringly bureaucratic and so disinterested in making the system work well or easy to use that it was going to be a struggle. Van Buskirk was up for a fight, but she missed all her friends back in California. Well, except for Nilsen.
power Beavis and Butthead.
Van Buskirk asked.
I'm sorry, Alan, but I've got absolutely no clue who you're talking about. Oh, you know.
Nilsen replied.
They're always trying to get me into trouble. But so far, I've managed to resist their bad influence.
Good for you.
Is Al Nilsen actually the great Cornholio?
Oh.
I am Cornholio! I need Sega for my bunghole!
That was how Kalinske ended the speech in the previous chapter. I'm Howard Lincoln. I need Timpy for my bunghole.
Thanks, EB. Wait, am I still allowed to call you that?
Why not?
I don't have to call you EBVBK? Yeah, forget that. I'm just calling you Alan.
1 month earlier, on January 15th, Ellen Beth Van Buskirk had married Bob Knapp, the man she had met at almost a year earlier at Gate 81. Nilsen was there. So was Ryu, Fornazier, Race, Glenn, and Schroeder. The whole gang, except for Kalinske, who had suffered a tennis injury earlier that day. You couldn't show up with it in a cast? Come on. It was a nice little reunion and made for an even more memorable wedding day.
They didn't play baseball afterwards, so the author has no interest.
I told you I wasn't going to take his name.
Van Buskirk reminded Nilsen.
Otherwise, my name would just turn into a tongue twister.
They had a laugh! As they mentioned favorite tongue twisters and challenged each other to see who could repeat them faster. Okay, so,
Peter Piper pickle with the pickles in the jar.
Yeah, that scene in the airport, the weird awkward romance, and this is the resolution. There you go. This is so meaningless, but it had to be in the book for some reason. After racing each other through Sally's efforts to get into the seashell business, Van Buskirk remembered that she had brought something she wanted to show him.
Have you seen this?
She asked, pulling out a copy of the February 21st issue of Business Week.
Oh, wow.
Nilsen said, smiling at the issue. On the cover was a drawing full of Sega characters. Sonic, Tails, Toe Jam, who we didn't introduce, the race car from Daytona, which we didn't introduce, and a few others. Above them, the name Sega was bright in yellow letters with a laudatory subtitle. Alex, read the subtitle first.
The $4 billion company that stung Nintendo is making a risky push into the exploding world of high-tech entertainment.
I need to run,
Van Buskirk said, gathering her mittens and preparing to bait.
Do you have more than two? How does one gather your mittens? You have two mittens. You don't gather.
Just like you gather your party.
I was going to say, you must gather your mittens before venturing forth.
But you can borrow that if you like.
You know, Ellen, you're leaving in quite a rush. Are you seeing someone else? First Tom and now you. I've got no luck in this life. Fantastic,
Nilsen said and bade her farewell. But before heading back to the land of Beavis and Butthead, he stayed in the coffee shop with the magazine to spend a few more minutes with Sonic and friends. The story was...
boy, Al Nilsen, now burn them all.
You know what? Now I just imagine just like the Sonic and Friends on the cover just start laughing like Beavis and
Butthead. Yeah. That fox has two tails.
The story was as wonderful as the cover indicated, but it was something at the very end of the story that caught his attention. After all the pages of gushing about Sega, Sonic, Kalinske, and Nakayama, and definitely not things about inventory, there was an article written by Neil Gross and Robert D. Hoff after a recent interview that they had conducted with Nintendo's Hiroshi Yamauchi. The article itself wasn't all that interesting, but what was interesting was that although it appeared in Business Week and would be read by millions, it seemed as if it was written exclusively for Yamauchi's son-in-law. Alex, take it away.
After months of being bloodied by Sega Enterprises Limited in North America, Nintendo Company President Hiroshi Yamauchi is taking off the gloves.
The mittens.
In a talk with Business Week at his Spartan headquarters in Kyoto, Yamauchi revealed a plan to recoup market share. Many details remain vague, but the stern 66-year-old patriarch of Japan's biggest game company made one thing clear. He'll make big changes in the way Nintendo manages its U.S. operations, promotes its products, and develops its games.
He improperly, copied this. The big change instead of changes.
Yeah, it's corrected in my version. It says changes. But yeah. His first priority is fixing the disaster in the U.S. market, where Nintendo's share of the 16-bit market plummeted from 60% at the end of 1992 to 37% a year later, according to Goldman Sachs and Company. With surprising candor, Yamauchi lays part of the blame on his son-in-law, Nintendo of America Incorporated President Minoru Arakawa. When Sega started running comparative ads in 1990, Nintendo failed to respond. In effect, says Yamauchi, Arakawa allowed Sega to brand our games as children's toys. It was a serious mistake.
Who do we have read for Yamauchi? Was that...
Might have been me. Oh.
Yeah, so FTB, you can read those.
Yeah.
You can read those.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, sure.
Where should I start from?
Okay. The next one,
okay.
I'll hand it off to you. Yamauchi expects Arakawa to change his style and hand more responsibility to senior American staffers.
I'm giving him another chance,
says the president.
But even in Japan, if results don't improve, you can't stay in a job.
Informed of those comments, Arakawa issued a statement promising that
1994
will be the most aggressive marketing year Nintendo has ever seen. I'm sorry. Sorry.
1994 will be the most aggressive marketing year Nintendo of America has ever seen.
What stopped Yamauchi from acting sooner is that the U.S. unit did so well under Arakawa's early stewardship. From 1987 to 1991, Nintendo's exports in the U.S. grew 8-fold. Americans have snapped up over 65 million Nintendo game machines since they went on sale in 1985. But growth has slowed in the past year, and profits are falling.
Big words, Nilsen thought as he finished, but he had trouble imagining that Nintendo would actually do anything different. Yamauchi might be upset, but it wasn't like he was going to fire his son-in-law. Nilsen was correct. Minoru Arakawa would not be fired, but Yamauchi did end up firing a warning shot at his son-in-law. Days after the interview, Howard Lincoln received a call from Yamauchi and was informed that he was Nintendo of America's new chairman, making him co-manager of NOA with Arakawa. It was just a title, and Lincoln had always been steering the ship right there with Arakawa, but it meant that for the first time in years, Nintendo was willing to change. And that was significant. Okay, Alex, you asked him about it.
It really didn't change anything.
Yeah.
They had already basically divided up responsibilities between them, and they continued to work in that same kind of symbiotic relationship. According to Howard Lincoln, who is Arakawa's friend, but still, it feels true.
Yeah, it seems like this is more performative for the business world. It's like, hey, we're making a change. Yeah. Now, basically, it meant that Howard Lincoln had co-equal responsibility in an executive sense because Minoru Arakawa was also on the board of directors. So
yeah,
it's not like it was a stealth demotion necessarily.
Yeah, that's the. I was going to bring that point up.
Though there was still impact, because I have it on good authority, even though this is not the public story, that when Yamauchi retired, Arakawa was passed over to succeed him. Like, the official story is Arakawa didn't want to move back to Japan, didn't really want to take over the company, but I have heard it from sources inside the company that he was stiffed, not that he was uninterested.
Yeah, and that, I mean, this is a whole story that, you could definitely try and write a book around if you could get the actual participants. But obviously, Harris cannot, and so he continues to talk in these vague terms and try to make big sweeping statements about Arakawa and stuff. He should just left him out of the story at this point, because he doesn't do anything in this entire goddamn book. Should have been about if you're gonna make a rivalry, it should have been with Howard Lincoln. Just leave, Peter Man could be a side character, but they're trying to split the responsibility, and yeah, it's stupid. Anyways, a couple of months later, Perrin Kaplan was in San Francisco to visit Silicon Graphics and discuss ways to position Project Reality. She was joined there by Don Varyu, a former news director. He had won the 1988 Edward R. Murrow Award for the best local news operation in the country, who had transitioned into public relations and had been working with NOA since 1991. As I noted in the Dramatics persona, I had to go and look this up. He was not working for NOA, he was with NOA, so this is actually correct way to say this. He was a lover of telling stories, a man who knew how to combine big ideas with small anecdotes, and as a result of his passion and talent had earned Nintendo's trust, and was often involved in the company's big picture messaging. He was also usually the one who worked with Peter Main and Howard Lincoln to craft their speeches for press conferences, analyst meetings, and the CES shows. There's that thing again.
Yes.
It's the Consumer Electronics Show.
I'm sure he's also been. Yeah, I'm sure he's also been known to use his old PIN number at the ATM machine.
Yes. It's the Consumer Electronics Show. Each booth is a smaller Consumer Electronics Show.
Is that like Sid Caesar's show of shows?
Yes, exactly.
It's the Mandelbrot set in true form. All right, I believe FTB.
I'm sure that Perrin already has at least 1 million golden ideas.
Varyu explained to the guys at SGI.
But I think something we should keep in the back of our minds throughout is the cautionary tale of 3DO.
Woo!
He then turned out the lights and put a flashlight under his chin.
Yes.
Gather round.
This gathering of the Midnight Society is about the 3DO.
Yeah, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. The cautionary tale of 3DO.
The 32-bit 3DO had only been out for a few months, but it had failed so badly that it had already felt like a thing of the past. A large part of the failure was the system's ridiculous price tag, $699.
Dun, dun, dun.
But another part of it was that it had been marketing so heavily as the technological answer to everything that nobody thought of it when it came to a specific anything. It was a video game system, a movie player, and a CD-ROM device, but nobody thought of it as a video game system, the movie player, or the CD-ROM device. Even more than taking it as a lesson in the value of specificity, Nintendo interpreted the failure of 3DO as proof that consumers need more than just technology. For years, Sega had been goading Nintendo into entering a technological arms race, and although they had thus far resisted, there was always that temptation to consider the what-ifs. But after 3DO, Nintendo felt even more confident in their longer-term, higher-quality strategy, particularly when it came to demonstrating patience with Project Reality. I mean, patience wasn't the issue. It took two years to develop the thing, and then, the whole fallout of not understanding why the console business does business the way it does, Poor Trip. You'll get redeemed one day. When you put out your memoir, get that thing done.
That's right.
As Kaplan and Varyu started to discussing the broad strokes of the messaging behind Nintendo's new console, a secretary from SGI interrupted them with an urgent message. Oh, there's a secretary. Jumpman, you take that.
Howard needs to speak with you immediately, sir.
She advised Kaplan, who went outside to take the call. Minutes later, she returned, looking half astonished, half petrified.
You're not going to believe.
No, that's Kaplan. So it's.
Oh, sorry.
Dale.
Shit, I was on mute. You're not going to believe what Howard wants to do.
Probably not.
Varyu replied.
But now I'm very curious to find out.
How do you feel about poetry?
Kaplan asked, still with that peculiar look on her face.
Particularly poems that rhyme.
Oh.
God, he wants to create a prequel to the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Donkey Kong the movie.
Because it rhymes.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Like poetry, it rhymes, yes. Varyu replied, now sporting the same expression as Kaplan. Earlier that morning, Howard Lincoln had come across a quote from Tom Kalinske, in which he claimed to be amazed that Nintendo...
I'm sorry. I was not expecting you to read here.
Yes.
Would so irresponsibly drag retailers and the entire video game, several words not quoted here, industry through the mud in their efforts to slow down our momentum.
That's really weird. What is this quote? Lincoln was stunned by the quote. It
was just swearing like a sailor for 2 hours straight. It was carnage.
Lincoln was stunned by the quote. It represented exactly how he felt, except about Sega. They were the ones who had caused this whole mess and threatened to ruin the industry with their blatant disregard for integrity. Not only was Kalinske's quote patently ridiculous, but the timing of it was almost as offensive. About 6 weeks earlier, Sega, Nintendo, and the industry's other major players had come to an agreement to set up a national ratings board, which would later become the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, ESRB. Dr. Arthur Pober would head the effort to get the operation up and running by the end of the year. To supervise the ratings board and also usher the industry into maturity, Kalinske had played a vital role in the creation of the Interactive Digital Software Association. Accomplishing both these things in such a short period of time was no small task, but it had the desired effect of impressing Senator Lieberman and the other representatives. So, following the second round of hearings in March, the politicians decided to give the video game industry the autonomy to regulate itself. There was no doubt that Kalinske deserved a significant amount of credit for rallying the industry, but so did Lincoln, pulling off this required unity, compromise, and string pulling on the part of both leaders. But they had gotten it done and managed to save their respective companies from the clutches of Congress. Okay, there's one big person who is missing from this equation. The guy who actually formed the IDSA.
Yes. Indeed. Jack Eistand, and of course Doug Lowenstein, the lawyer that they put in charge of it. But yeah. No, it's funny because of course, actually, later on, Blake Harris did a actually really good series of articles on the beginning of the ESRB, and he did speak to Eistand for that series of articles. So he made up for that.
Yes, I need to find that article. Yeah, here we go. So I will send that out.
It was a whole series, multi-part thing.
Yeah, on the ESRB website.
Yeah.
So it is an officially endorsed history.
Yeah, it was done for the 20th anniversary. The ESRB, I think
25th.
Maybe 25th. Yeah.
Getting the numbers correct.
Yeah.
Lincoln harbored no illusions that they were now friends, nor did he believe that Sega and Nintendo would ever blissfully hold hands and walk into the next generation of video games. But come on, for Kalinske to say what he'd said and to say it so soon? Give me a break. Lincoln was mad and wanted a way to fire back at Kalinske. In the past, that outlet had often been litigation, but here that made no sense. Like, what, against Sega? Like...
Kalinske personally, there's a huge custody battle about that dog that the book just didn't have time to go in.
The most efficient and effective response would be give an interview to the or issue some kind of press release, but both these methods felt too tame, too expected, and too unmemorable. Lincoln would say something, then Kalinske would say something back, and the word count between the two would pile up faster than the dead Montagues and Capulets. Hey, we got a reference that he got to later. But what Lincoln needed was a way to end the conversation and to make sure Nintendo had the final word and ideally have some fun in the process. Yes, Lincoln is a man who covets fun. Over the past couple of years, and particularly the past couple of months, Nintendo had stopped remembering to have fun. That likely had a lot to do with Sega taking a bite of Nintendo's market share, but it was time to remember what Nintendo was all about. When asked what she did for a living, Perrin Kaplan used to say,
I sell joy.
I sell joy.
And she'd been 100% correct. Nintendo
so she was a drug dealer then?
Joy.
Well, Nintendo was about wandering through the Mushroom Kingdom, obvious, and saving the princess. It's all coded language. That was what they did for a living, and it was time to bring back the fun. The fun is back, as Atari used to say. Yamauchi had appointed Lincoln as chairman to start making changes, and there was no better way. There's no better way to demonstrate this new era at Nintendo than by publicly doing something fun. Kaplan loved this attitude and was with Lincoln every step of the way, except when it came time to demonstrate the fun.
A poem?
Varyu confirmed.
Actually,
she revised.
Wait. Oh, I see what they meant by confirmed. That's just an awkward use of the word confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's already failed English class many chapters ago. There's
But I see what he's trying to say.
A Roses Are Red poem.
It should be question mark exclamation point, probably. That's terrible.
Isn't it?
Absolutely.
Good, because that's what I told him.
And what did he say?
He said I was right.
Varyu sighed in relief. What an embarrassment that would have been. After a relieved chuckle, he and Kaplan got back to discussing Project Reality. Things were going well until an hour later when a secretary returned with the news that Howard Lincoln was on the line again. This time Varyu went into the hallway with her and stated his case for why this was a terrible idea. Although Link was angry with Kalinske and upset by their reaction, he could see the reason in their logic and thanked the both of them for their advice. Once again, they felt glad to get back to their discussions of how to position Nintendo's new 64-bit system, sophisticated but accessible, a high-powered machine that didn't look intimidating. Everyone was on the same page, and they appeared to be getting somewhere until, for the third time, Howard Lincoln called to discuss poetry.
It's still not a good idea.
Kaplan responded in faux exasperation.
And since we last spoke, I think I've come up with at least 10 more reasons why.
Howard. Buddy.
Varyu added.
I admire the effort, but you just can't do it.
Well, actually, Lincoln replied, sounding as calm and calculated as he always did. I can.
I already did.
I thought that's what he was going to say. Like,
20
I did.
minutes
Yeah, just
ago.
20 minutes ago, yes. Watchmen reference. Dropped a giant squid on Sega headquarters. Form the ESRB to protect ourselves from the squid aliens.
Yes, that's it. I can. I'm the chairman, and I'm doing it. The following day, Nintendo issued a press release with the poem that the new chairman had written. Dear Tom, roses are red, violets are blue. So you had a bad day. Boo-hoo, hoo-hoo. All my best, Howard. And yes, that did actually happen. That is not a made-up thing.
Oh,
he did that.
That is.
Yeah, I
that
thought
is
it was going to be
real.
something like roses are red, violets are blue. Fuck you, signed Howard.
Okay, last chapter for the night. Chapter 59. We start off.
I have to go back to lurking mode if there's no main here.
Okay, yeah, there's no main.
Thank you.
It should be good.
Thank you. It's been lovely.
And you have been. We first have Olafsson, president of Sony Electronic Publishing, knows how to pick a good lackey.
And then we have Steve Race, unemployed ruffian, ready to break the mold and make his ex-company jealous.
Just like Al Nilsen. I've been waiting to use that unemployed bit for a while.
Indeed.
Tom
by myself.
Yes, by Alex. Setting up for something brilliant. Tom Kalinske, president and CEO of Sega of America. Starry-eyed and bushy-tailed. Played by Alex.
Then we have Mike Fisher's back, product manager at Sega Enterprises Limited, a concerned friend, but not that concerned.
Played by FTB. Next is Minoru Arakawa, president of Nintendo of America, ready to be amazed, bedazzled, astounded. But that's enough about Project Reality. You see, that was a brick joke. You didn't even know it. Played by
And finally, Tony Harman, director of development and acquisitions for Nintendo of America. Did good.
Both capitalized, and that is Wait, was Jumpman doing it? Who did Tony Harman before? Was it Jumpman?
I did. I was doing it earlier.
Johnny will take it.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 59. A blast from the past. Blast processing from the past, it should have said.
Yes.
Now tell me.
Olafsson said from his castle in New York as he interviewed candidates for the president's job at Sony Computer Entertainment of America while lightning flashed in the background.
What have you been up to since departing Sega?
The candidate chuckled in a low, melodious way.
How much time do you have?
Olafsson liked this guy already, and his answers further convinced Olafsson that he was the right man to run SCEA, which had been formed in May 1994 as the formal division within Sony to launch the new video game console, the PSX. Much like he did with Sony, the ImageSoft, and Psygnosis, Olafsson would oversee this new division, but whoever became president would be given the space to operate as he or she saw fit. Yeah, it was never going to be a she. Sorry, it's just corporate realities of the world.
Yes.
Although the Sega name carried a lot of weight, there was...
Sony name.
No, the Sony name carried a lot of weight. There was skepticism about this venture from retailers, from distributors, and most of all, from customers. Now, customers wanted SONY on their devices. Whoever became responsible for launching the PSX would need to be an intuitive thinker, an inspiring leader, and a smooth talker. And as crass as it might sound, would need to have balls of steel.
Hail to the king, baby. But on a serious note...
Olafsson continued, not being very serious.
Where has the world taken you?
The candidate, Steve Race, smirked. I love to tell a good story.
See, after Sega, I did a few turnaround assignments for some venture capital firms that I've kept in touch with over the years. Nothing wild, nothing lasting more than a couple of months, until I got a call from Philips. They wanted me to come in and evaluate this product called DBI. Have you ever seen this thing? I'd sprinkle in a few details about that piece of shit, but it's always the goddamn brain space if you ask me. Anyway, I came to the conclusion very quickly that this was a non-competitive product, and I had to shut it down. They became ultimately me, and I was given the exciting task of dismantling this needlessly elaborate house of cards.
Wouldn't even dig any pictures of Spider-Man.
Well, let me just say that was really well voiced.
Oh, he's been building up Steve Race as this absolutely insane man.
Thank you.
Tell me, is that something you take pleasure in?
Race shrugged.
I'm good at it, I guess. I seem to do well with putting things together or with taking things apart.
Beginnings and endings,
Olafsson said.
Well, that pretty much runs the spectrum then. Do you not possess any areas of weakness?
Oh, I've got plenty of those.
Race said with a grin.
Would you like to share them?
Nah.
Race replied.
If you bring me in, you'll find out soon enough.
I have to say, one of the funniest thing, when you talk to Race, he did not mention Sega at all, right?
That was my fault. I knew he had consulted there, but I actually didn't realize that he was so deep in it, so I did not ask the questions. He would have talked about Sega with me.
Okay.
I mean, that would have made the interview 4 hours long, though, because it was already a 3-hour interview.
Yes, so Alex got some good deets from Mr. 299 here, which is why he gets to play him. The interview progressed very nicely from there. Olafsson appreciated Race's run-through-a-wall mentality and his ability
I mean, he can transform into a mist, so of course he would.
and to convince others to follow him through, which he does with his, mystical eye powers. This would be particularly valuable given that Sony would be selling a product nobody had ever seen, heard of, or thought about before. Race 2 was taken with Olafsson, whom he quickly nicknamed the
Nordic Knucklehead.
How is that a compliment in any way?
Watch what you're saying, pal, or I'll suck your blood dry.
The Transylvania something. I don't know. I couldn't come up with anything.
Knucklehead feels like it would be like an Asterix and Obelix reference.
As Race heard more about the budgets that would be involved and Sony's commitment to aggressive marketing, he began to covet the chance to once again shake up the video game industry with his heat-seeking competitive strategies and the snarky brand of shenanigans. But, as at Sega, there was a lingering concern.
To be perfectly honest,
Race explained,
I'm very reluctant to go and work for a Japanese company. That kind of conservative micromanaging is not really for me. So you can tell me a little bit about what that dynamic would look like.
You racist bastard.
Oh, we're going to get into a lot worse. I'm just going to tell you.
Is that why your parents called you Steve Race? Because it's all you think about, you sicko?
Oh my gosh.
Ow.
Look at me, I'm a blood-sucking horror movie monster, and even I'm disgusted by you.
Oh, boy. I love Olafsson. He's so good.
Well, this is an excellent question.
Olafsson replied,
and I believe you will be pleased with the answer. Essentially, Sony Corporate does not believe in what we are doing. They have agreed to pay a few bills and open a couple of connections. But it seems to me like they might be very happy if we just went ahead and failed spectacularly. This sounds like embellishment, perhaps, but there is a hard truth to it. For example, they would prefer if we don't use the Sony name on the product, and they have already prohibited its usage on the packaging.
Sounds like a serious bummer.
It is.
Olafsson agreed.
But with this imposed distance comes a certain level of freedom, one which I believe will suit you quite well.
This was mostly truth, but it was also what Olafsson knew Race needed to hear. He also knew that given Race's reputation for either flaming out or getting bored easily, he likely wouldn't be at a company long enough for this to become a major issue. Yes, he was definitely anticipating the entire team getting fired, but that's a whole other story, which will happen at the end of the book. At this specific time, Race was the right man for the job, and so Olafsson offered to protect him from the Japanese if this man, who had a finger in Atari, Nintendo, and Sega, was willing to slap on an eye patch and come sail Sony's pirate ship into the unknown. What the fuck does that mean? What are these metaphors?
Yeah. And also, like, I'm not up on the history of PlayStation packaging, but every picture of a PlayStation box I can see on the internet says Sony on it in really obvious letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had Sony's name on it. I don't know where they're getting that from.
I think this seems like something that has been said before, that they were initially reluctant about letting the Sony name be on the product. I believe that has been said, but I don't know to what extent that was really true.
That would be a huge mistake, because then we wouldn't get the famous
One more question.
Olafsson said, looking around for Wolfsbane.
Which I failed to ask you earlier. Sega. Oh, no, sorry. Sega. Do you have any ill will towards them?
No.
Race replied.
The opposite, actually. I think rather highly of Kalinske and what he's got going on over there.
and it will be no problem for you to compete with your former colleagues.
Not at all.
Race said, shaking his head in a way that made it appear witless.
As the saying goes, the devil you know is more fun to do battle with than the devil you don't.
What does that mean? What does it mean?
Who says that?
Exactly.
You!
Oh,
just hear me!
That's funny you should say the devil, because I was just speaking to him last week.
Olafsson wasn't quite sure the saying went this way, but he couldn't argue with the logic of SCEA's soon-to-be president. He wouldn't dare to do anything to dampen that wonderful fighting spirit. Alex, pull out your thing about SCEA.
Which thing about SCEA?
That you would expect that it would be the subsidiary.
Oh, yeah. Right. So you would think that Sony Computer Entertainment America would be a subsidiary of Sony Computer Entertainment Incorporated in Japan, because they have the same names. But it is, in fact, not at this point in its history. Not until, I believe, 1997 is when they take it over. So basically, everyone in Japan, Maruyama and Kutaragi and everybody, Tokunaka, that are running SCEI have no ability to tell Steve Race and the people at SCEA what to do, because it's a subsidiary of Sony Electronic Publishing, which is a subsidiary of Sony America.
Which is in turn a subsidiary of
Sony Corporation.
Yes.
Exactly.
Nested companies.
Yes. Whereas SCEI is a joint venture between parent Sony Corporation and Sony Music. Just to make things more corporate shenanigan-y.
Can't wait for that episode.
Japanese corporate division is such a headache. Don't even get to their media divisions and things like ArtMake and stuff like that. Oh my god.
While Olafsson was at work reeling in a blast from the past, Kalinske took the opportunity to welcome one of his own, Mike Fischer, the American at SOJ who had been such a great, subtle peacemaker over the years. Fischer had been on the fence about leaving Sega of Japan, but after his father's recent heart attack and the quintuple bypass that followed... Quintuple? I didn't even know you could do a quintuple.
Yeah, that can happen.
You can. That is the most you can do, I believe.
It felt like the right time to move back to the United States, and so in spring 1994, Fischer had left SOJ to join SOA and help Kalinske oversee SOE. With Sega, which they don't explain what that is, it hasn't come up for like 50 chapters. But with Sega's rapid ascension in Europe, Fischer's move appeared to have come at a perfect time, but as excited as Kalinske was to have a trusted colleague building European relations.
In Europe, this is the period of time when their European business is falling off a cliff, and like it's actually being reported on in the newspapers at the time. It's not just something we know after the fact. I just did a 1994 jump with Carl, where there was a headline about how Sega was doing really bad in Europe.
Fischer had always alerted him to things on SOJ's radar, but now he would be flying blind.
Let me ask you a question.
Kalinske began, giving Fischer a tour of Sega's headquarters at Redwood Shores.
Are you at all opposed to my cloning you? That way, you can work both here and in Japan.
It's Sega's newest product.
FTB.
Oh, sorry. Not at all.
Fischer said with a smile.
As long as I, or rather my clone and I, are getting paid double.
Sure.
Kalinske replied.
I'll just have to check with HR about that.
Again, going back through this book, like taking the book as a story in itself, what did Fischer help with? What did he help? Like, Kalinske's like, you're so helpful. You should still be in Japan. But like, what did he give him? To the Pico story, I guess.
He alerted him to the fact that he would be betrayed.
Although Fischer was being treated to the same wit as usual, he sensed something askew in Kalinske's tone, or is it askew?
Tom, Is everything okay?
99 times out of 100, Kalinske answered that question with an optimistic non-response, but there was something about Fischer that always relaxed his demeanor.
I don't know.
Kalinske said, pausing to let a group of inventory pass him, of smiling employees from product development, pass by.
They did correct it. They corrected it. These are just weird times, I suppose.
What kind of weird?
Kalinske didn't quite know how to put it into words, but it was a very specific feeling.
It's hard to say,
He described, scouring his mind for the best example of this wordless thing.
As the author tries to struggle to find a metaphor.
I've just got this feeling deep inside of me. No. But it's happening more and more lately. Okay, I realize that sounds ominous, so let me just give you an example. Earlier today, I was looking at the most recent software numbers.
Were they good?
No.
Kalinske replied.
They were fantastic.
Fantastic was an understatement. Of the top 10 video games sold in March 1994, 8 of them were for the Genesis, and 4 of them were being published directly by Sega. Jumpman, will you read for me?
And coming in at number 1, it's NBA Jam for the Genesis. Followed closely.
Boom shakalaka!
Followed closely by number 2, it's NBA Jam for the Super Nintendo. And after
Another nail in the coffin.
And after that, it's SGI with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Number 4, Midway and Acclaim climbing the charts with Mortal Kombat.
Finish him!
At number 5, we have Disney in with a new hit, Aladdin. Number 6, Nintendo strikes it rich with Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball. And at number 7, it's NHL 94. Number 8, NBA Showdown 94. Number 9, World Series Baseball. And faltering in at number 10, it's Sega with Sonic Spinball. And now back to top of the games.
I wish there was a sound cue for Sonic Spinball with the options music.
Well, if you want to extract that, we can put it on the soundboard.
Oh,
Instead, we just
please.
have this.
That'll be terrible.
That's terrific, Tom.
Fischer declared.
You should be proud.
We should be proud.
Kalinske the communist corrected.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. When I look at those figures, I should be overjoyed. And part of me is, believe me, but another part can't help but fast forward to a couple of years from now and wonder if Sega will even have one game in the top 10. Have you seen the Saturn?
I'm sure the developers are still getting used to the environment.
Fischer explained, not understanding that it's later. Don't even get dev kits until like 2 months before the system goes out.
Besides, concerns like that are normal. We all occasionally suffer from fear of success and 30 years of misrepresentation of how the Saturn did. It's human.
That's what I thought at first.
Kalinske replied.
But what if it's not actually fear of success and actually fear of something lurking beneath that success?
You mean
like
bees,
unsold
Tom?
inventory. I'm talking unsold inventory. Almost like it's the perfect day at the beach. The sun is shining and the water is warm, but right there, hiding in the bushes, is Hayao Nakayama.
And then we loop back to the beginning of the book.
Yes! It's a recursive loop.
Wait. The whole thing has been a flashback up to this point. We're still on chapter 1.
Right. But right there beneath the surface, there's a very hungry sewer shark.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Fischer said, bobbing his head side to side.
Give me
I
a
don't know what
second
that
to
means.
hide my dorsal fin here. Well, if that were the case, and I don't think it is, then you have two choices. Enjoy it while it lasts, or learn how to outswim the shark. Oh, you've cut your finger, huh? Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. I was hoping that wouldn't happen.
What if it's already too late, Kalinske wanted to ask. He looked around the office, taking great pride in having built such a powerful team and so much inventory. Oh my god, why is there so much?
Beautiful inventory. The hugest inventory in the
business. 8 out of 10 titles in the top 10. Outstanding. But what if it was already too late to ship to the retailers? Well, instead of asking this, however, Kalinske showed Fischer to his new office that was piled through with Genesis units and Game Gears, and oh my god, and officially welcomed him to Sega of America. Yes, we're going to keep harping on this till the end because it's something that needs to be said and needs to be remembered. They had too much stuff. It wasn't entirely their fault, but they had too much stuff, and this is the reason they lose a bunch of money. Just needs to be said. Huh? Minoru Arakawa quietly murmured when his keycard did not work. He tried it once more.
That's actually his review quote from reading Console Wars.
Huh? Put it on the back of the book. He tried it once more, but again was denied. And it slowly dawned on Arakawa that he had not been granted access to the third-floor office space that Tony Harman had taken to calling the treehouse. Tony... Arakawa playfully shouted while gently knocking on the door and laughing to himself. Tony!
What's your name?
Finally, Harman poked his head out of the door.
Mr. A.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. A, what are you doing here?
I heard you have something special to show me, Arakawa replied. But first, I must ask why my keycard does not work.
Oh, that?
Harman said with a sheepish grin.
I never thought you'd want to come in, but since you're here, let me show you around.
He had to hide his drug-making implements in the back. So. Physically, Nintendo's Treehouse did not quite live up to its name. I mean, that would be really fucking weird if it did. It was a nearly 2,000 square foot area with a few 4-foot-high cubicles, a small conference room, and an L-shaped bench in the back of the office. But a closer look revealed that philosophically, it was everything an adult treehouse should be.
What?
Beside those cubicles were some old arcade cabinets. Was there Skyscraper? Was Skyscraper there? Hanging in the conference room were storyboards of games to be, and piled up on that bench in the back was a pyramid of hardware systems. It was a fun place to work, no doubt, but there was lots of work to be done. This new space was where NOA had now localized NCL's Japanese games, reviewed third-party titles, and for Tony Harman, as well as his external producers Ken Lobb and Brian Ulrich, it was a place to develop games without constantly being asked, "What you working on?"
I just thought they've got the arcade games in the room, right? Let's hope they try not to mimic the translation style of those arcade games.
You must defeat Shenlong.
When a certain structures have been cleared, Jumpman saves the lady. Anyone? Bonus when you gain a certain points.
How high can you get? After a quick tour of the treehouse, Harman showed Arakawa what he had come to see, the game that Rare had been working on. It was still about 10 to 12 months from completion and didn't even have a name. Its codename was Country because the Rare studio was located in the English countryside, but the Stamper brothers had been doing such an incredible job with the game, and absolutely nobody else helped them with it, that Harman wanted his boss to have a look. When Arakawa finally sat down and watched a demo of the game, he looked like he had seen a ghost. I mean, there is the levels with the ghosts, so maybe he did. And in many ways he had, because what Arakawa saw was the hulking body of an old friend, one who had been defeated by Mario so many years earlier. 13 years ago, this character had rescued Nintendo of America from obscurity. Now he is back again to haunt the competition. After these years, the wonderful beast had returned. Funky Kong Donkey Kong.
Da, 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 da.
This is incredible, Arakawa declared. The 64-bit games will look good? This good?
What do you mean?
Harman asked.
We're making games that are Ultra 64.
Do you expect many games will appear this quality on the Ultra 64?
Oh!
Harman said, pleasantly taken aback.
No, Mr. A, this game is for the Super Nintendo.
The look on Arakawa's face was equal to the incredible multiplied by impossible. That's game,
not a number,
which was later to be called Donkey Kong Country, was only 16 bits. I believe this story has been told in other venues, but at this time, when Arakawa would have seen it, he would have known that the Ultra 64 chipset was not done. Because they first announced it as done at the beginning of 1995, and it wasn't truly done for various reasons, but that's a whole other story. I don't think he... maybe he said something in jest, but I don't think he was literally like, oh, this is a 64 game. I don't know if that's true. Summer CES 1994 was only 6 weeks away. Wait, so they're in May, and he was saying earlier, like, it's like 12 months from completion. But like,
time has...
What?
Yeah, time has not made sense for a good number of chapters.
Because what they showed at Summer CES was like, they had levels to finish, but it was done as a game.
Need I remind you that we were in a winter storm a chapter or two ago?
Yeah. But Arakawa was... we're getting way more time compression coming. But Arakawa was convinced that it was worth undoing everything to feature this and only this. Yeah, like they had nothing else at the CES. That's just wrong. Don James, who designed Nintendo's fantastic display, would later be asked to make this change and somehow, in only a matter of weeks, create a 30,000 square foot booth with a volcanic island flaming in the middle. I mean, it's a
They're going to sacrifice Howard Lincoln for luck.
They do, like, you can look at the CES footage, and they do, like, Donkey Kong chasing around scantily clad women kind of thing.
Yes, I know. I've seen it.
Yes. And they did have Donkey Kong in real time there as well. With Charles Martinet playing Donkey Kong.
Yep.
As a smooth dude.
Did they have a guy in a Mario suit pick a fight with Donkey Kong, for old time's sake?
They're not that clever. Thousands would come to marvel at this amazing game, the one that would extend the lifespan of the SNES and prove that Nintendo could rise back to the top without needing to rely on violence, name-calling, or flashy marketing. I mean, it was marketed pretty heavily, so no about that. Make no mistake, there'd be tons of marketing for the game. Peter Main, George Harrison, and Perrin Kaplan would be allowed to go to town. The difference was just that, unlike their competitor, there would be substance behind the style. Unless you believe that one Miyamoto quote, which
I was just about to bring that up.
We talked about that in Kent. He probably didn't say it. Kent was probably the one who got the quote, and he probably got a mistranslation. Normally, Arakawa's initial order for the game that Nintendo deemed to be an A-plus title was 1 million units, but for Donkey Kong Country, he ordered 4 million right off the bat. This is what Nintendo had been waiting for, after all, and it was finally time for the tortoise to open the war chest and strap on a jetpack. Okay. Did it take longer than Arakawa expected for Nintendo to make their big move? Maybe. But he was not at all surprised at the time it finally arrived. The only thing that surprised him in the end was that inside of the tortoise shell there was a gorilla hidden inside. What the fuck does that mean?
What?
That doesn't even work as a sentence. Inside of the tortoise shell, there was a gorilla hidden inside.
That's like the end of that one SpongeBob episode where you have the realistic gorilla in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think SpongeBob makes more narrative sense at this point.
I mean, in the words
at least
of
SpongeBob has the time indicators like 7 years later and such things. Like they don't.
In the words of Arakawa, huh?
Turning into it's turning into a Thomas Pynchon novel. Is the rest of it just going to be like scatterings of words on the end of the pages until the pages start to like
Tony?
letters fall off the pages? Yes.
Yes.
You did good.
Thank you, Mr. A.
What did
No,
Tony do here? He just let him into the
One
thing
more
and showed
word.
him Donkey Kong Country.
anytime.
Bring us home.
Woo!
Bring us
Okay. That is the
Oh,
penultimate
snap.
episode finished, and next time we're going in for a big one. It will be the safari. You know, you can.
Please, going on safari.
Yep, and Dale will have to be here bright and early for the climactic episode of Console Wars.
You know, I just realized that would be episode number 15, but yet we won't have an episode number 16. So we won't no 16 bits for Console Wars.
Ah, dang.
Yeah.
Well, we could always do a fake episode if we just make things up. I mean,
I thought we were doing one
no.
after the book was completed to do a final discussion of that would make it 16, wouldn't it?
We would.
There you go.
We could
There
do
you
that.
go. That would be 16.
Though this,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, I'm gonna scroll through this real quick. Like, this is a little bit shorter than the rest of them, so I was kind of thinking we just have a discussion at the end.
What's
of that,
our
but...
page we're currently on, and what's our final page? Since you only have one more session.
We are on page 512. And let me see what page the book actually ends on. That's not index. The last page of actual text is page 556.
Okay, so about 50 pages.
One more session. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see how things kind of shake out at the end here. As always, we have no real plan, but we will definitely be wrapping up next time in terms of reading the book. That is definitely going to happen. So what were our lessons today, everybody? Don't let Olafsson into your house, obviously.
I don't think I would let the guy who was interviewing into the house either. I feel like he'd be hopping around and like turning on turning up and down all the switches on the breaker and like just throwing things randomly. Oh my God, you have refrigerator magnets. You know those things can fly slam. You know, just.
I linked in the chat the Blake Harris ESRB thing if you want to read that.
Throwing it over your.
We did learn that FTB does a great Lieberman.
Yeah,
definitely that.
There was that snow fight that was prevented.
Yes. Did I imagine two 50-year-old men down in the snow punching each other as, you know, like it's a teen movie from the 90s or something? They just needed to get it all out, and then they could be friends forever.
Yeah, exactly. And then they would just sit down and start laughing. And then, like, Hayao Nakayama and Hiroshi Yamauchi would come out and just see them there, sitting there laughing, and then just kind of look bemused and walk on.
I would just like to say, Gimme Alexandria's Console Wars is now available in a 30-volume cassette series.
How long would this be if we put it on cassette?
Oh, God.
How long were those Wheel of Time books on cassette? It's like 20 cassettes. Ridiculous stuff.
I can absolutely guarantee you that the Wheel of Time, that the Console Wars read along will still be a more accurate version of the Wheel of Time than the show that was just canceled.
Oh boy, that's a thing. But yeah, this is definitely, you see editor's fatigue if the editor was ever even there really to begin with, but Blake Harris just really stopped caring about the words he was saying.
The one bit of character stuff that actually is going through the book and does seem to be at least thought out is the Kalinski's growing exhaustion with where he is. Like, that's the one character trait that is being expressed. So if I could just say one nice thing for once, I do think that was well illustrated in those chapters. Like, there was a lot of bad writing and very bad metaphors around them, but I do think it was at least making it clear that Kalinske was sick of everyone's shit at that point.
But now we're about to get like a big skip of everything, so you don't even get to see it all the way through.
And we're not going to get the part where Shuichiro Irimajiri told him, you have 1 year to restructure the company or we will fire you. And then he didn't, and then they fired him.
Yeah, I had a feeling they weren't going to talk about that. It wouldn't work with the shining beacon of Tom Kalinske that the book presents, you know.
That's because that's not how Kalinske has ever told it. But
Yeah.
I kind of believe Irimajiri, because why would he lie about that?
You know, the theory is that, you know, if they had just held on to him, he would have been the I don't know, the Kwisatz Sega-Ak, and he would have somehow unified all the.
Yeah, we're gonna get into the little bit that this is written about the Saturn and whatnot, but like this focus goes absolutely out of control after this, and yeah, I know there's
already starting to unmoor. The wheels were starting to wobble already, and so they just fall off the car by the end of the book.
These last 5 chapters have no through line, really.
Oh, good God!
Like, you know,
does the book even have an ending?
Yes, it
just
does.
Kind of...
Okay. It ends decently well for the story that it's telling. You know, the thing about the Kalinske character gets wrapped up, but just nothing else, you know, aside from his personal journey, nothing else really leads into that. And the other story is just like, yeah, then these things happened. You know, where are they now?
Is it like the Borgia TV show where the ending they decided was so terrible that they had to have all the actors come out and explain what happened to the characters? Like, literally, they do the ending to the show and the actor comes out and he's like, that's not what happened in history. Here's what's happened to Cesare Borgia. And then for 16 minutes, they go on and explain, like, what actually happened. Like, I still am shocked that they did that ending, because eventually it's just literally the lead actor coming out in costume at the very end of the show and being like, that ending was fucking stupid. What was I thinking? Here's the real ending.
It's kind of like what they did in the pinball film.
Yeah, the ending of European Borgia is that Cesare Borgia fakes his death and goes to the New World, which didn't happen. So, like, no historical account has ever said. It's not worth seeing unless you want a guy with a Boston accent playing, because John Logan is Rodrigo, and Cesare. They're all played with their native accents. So the Lucretia Borgia is German and has a very, very German accent. And Cesare is Italian Spanish, so he flaps between the two. And for some reason, the guy who played Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones is Savonarola, the monk that, you know, burned all the mirrors and stuff. So it kind of makes a hash of the history. It's better than the Jeremy Irons one because it covers more stuff, but I feel about that story the way you guys feel about Kent.
Yeah. So we're the storytelling is going to take a dive. I think the big emotions have been expressed. You know, we got some fun moments that we're going to go through, but this is really the tippy top in terms of
our main and Kalinske going to fight again. Is it going to be like Highlander? Are they going to fight in an abandoned warehouse or something like that?
No, a full warehouse full of Sega Game Gear.
He's going to climb up the girders and start throwing barrels at him, but it's going to barrels at
he throws him off on the he throws him off, and then he has a big dramatic fall like the end of Die Hard, and then it's like, oh my god, I'm still alive, thank god for all this unsold Sega inventory.
See, we should write the movie, you know?
Exactly, we're so much better at this.
You see, I told you he was lying about the numbers.
That would be like if this were a satirical thing. That would be a brilliant like ending.
But seriously though, guys, I would think that we should write like a parody script for this. You know, pretend it's serious, but you know, completely take the piss out of the whole book whilst adapting it to film at the same time.
Well, somebody else will have to spearhead that effort because I'm always too focused on doing things like this. We are probably, once we wrap up the next session, we will probably be doing... Who here has not seen the Console Wars documentary?
I haven't.
FTV?
I've seen it.
Jumpman?
I think I might have seen it at the time, but I can't remember anything from it. So.
Okay. We will try to arrange for a viewing of the Console Wars documentary just as a comparison piece to the book.
Just make sure to splice in, anytime you see Olafsson to put in Bela Lugosi instead.
I do my best.
We have created so many memorable characters. Soon we're gonna have to say goodbye to them. Though, a couple. When we do Kent Volume 2, which I think we'll try to aim for doing next year, we'll do some stuff in between that. But we will have a chance to define some more memorable characters through the block quotes and whatnot. But yeah, if you guys have any other ideas in the meantime of things we should do, let me know. Just focus on finishing this Console Wars stuff. Then we'll cool off for a little bit. Then probably do one of the shorter books, and maybe do some co-op cover rating and things.
Console Wars, a little golden book.
Right. Yeah, we do need to get back to those cover ratings. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so some things that we can decompress from this very intensive. I know everybody puts their work into their acting here. Utmost professionalism from everybody involved.
I mean, I've been the CEO of a Fortune 500 company for like 9 months now, just to understand my character.
And you've been taking speed every time you need to play Steve Race. So, yes, the jokes will continue, but we will be finishing up the story next time. Thanks everybody for coming by. You're all beautiful, and we will talk again soon. And thank you, Arcade Ages, for the love in the chat. All the previous readings are up as a VOD on my channel. Be sure to watch my my social media spaces, and you'll get a link to the entire playlist when I post the next episode. But let's round off for the night. See you all later.
See you later.
Good night.
Good night.
Night night.